No one has ever been as dangerous to America as Trump. It's a quote from General Mark Milley, who was the top military officer in the United States, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, the position that Dwight Eisenhower once held during World War II. Speaking of Donald Trump. The Office of Strategic Services, the OSS, was the American predecessor to the CIA. This was created at the beginning of World War II. After World War II, it went away and was replaced by the CIA, essentially, the OSS. And they hired, in 1940, they hired a psychoanalyst, Dr. Walter C. Langer, to undertake an exhaustive, nearly year-long analysis of Adolf Hitler. From his childhood through his adulthood, through, basically everything that they knew about Hitler. And that report was not declassified until 1972, when it was incorporated into a book titled The Mind of Adolf Hitler. As the New York Times explained that year, 1972, the quote, Langer saw Hitler as a weakling who masqueraded as a bully. Hitler the failure, casting himself in the role, unconsciously for reasons of mental self-preservation, as Hitler the Führer the Superman. Right. And based on Langer's work, the OSS summarized the strategy that Hitler used, driven in part by his own psychopathy, or psychopathy, to both seize and hold power. Quote, his primary rules were, now just listen to this. This is the OSS describing Adolf Hitler in 1943. His primary rules were never let the public cool off, never admit a fault or wrong, never concede that there might be some good in your enemy, never leave room for alternatives, never accept blame, concentrate on one enemy at a time and blame him for everything that goes wrong. People will believe a big lie sooner than a little one, and if you repeat it frequently enough, people will sooner or later believe it. End of quote. Sound familiar? And now, most recently, we learned that Donald Trump has told us that he intends to use the military to go after his so-called enemies. The military is... Trump said, I think the bigger problem is the enemy from within. We have some very bad people. We have some sick, radical left lunatics. It should be very easily handled by, if necessary, by the National Guard, or if really necessary, by the military, because they can't let that happen. End quote. And, we learned this past weekend that former chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, Mark Milley, told Bob Woodward, quote, no one has ever been as dangerous to this country as Donald Trump. Now I realize he's a total fascist. He is the most dangerous person to this country. The Washington Post added that General Milley told them that he, quote, also fears being recalled to uniform to be court-martialed for disloyalty should Trump win against Vice President Kamala Harris in November. Milley's fear of being put in front of a firing squad is well placed. Trump himself told Woodward about Milley and other generals, quote, I will order them back to active duty and then I will court-martial them. Rolling Stone magazine, reporters Aswin Subasang and Patrick Reese wrote an article for Rolling Stone in which they interviewed a number of people who'd been very close to Donald Trump when he was in the White House. The headline of their article kind of summarizes the whole thing. Quote, Trump plans to bring back firing squads, group executions if he retakes White House. Right. And Trump has promised to go after journalists. He calls us the enemies of the people. I mean, I think that might be one of the reasons why so many journalists have gone so soft on Trump. And frankly, I have little doubt that if he's elected, he'll do everything he can to break people like me. And you, if you've ever posted anything on Facebook or Twitter or any social media against Trump. I mean, Viktor Orban is arresting people for saying bad things about him on Facebook. Putin has been, putting people in prison for years for speaking out against him on social media. And then you got Mike Flynn, who was pardoned from prison for lying to the FBI about his meetings with the Russian ambassador. And Trump has promised him a job in the next administration. He was in Reverend Moon's son's church and said, believe me, if we win, then Katie bar the door. Believe me, the gates of hell, my hell, will be unleashed. Right. So here we have, Donald Trump laying out basically a fascist vision for America. And then you got, Trump's protege, J.D. Vance, his vice presidential running mate, who, if Trump gets elected, will almost certainly become president sometime in the next 4 years, given how old Trump is and what kind of poor health he's in. Last night, he had this town hall, in fact, with Kristi Noem moderating. Now, town halls are where you answer questions from the people, right? So Trump shows up for the town hall. He gets 2 questions. He completely flubs both of them. Just goes into these long, rambling, things that didn't make any sense, and he didn't answer either question. And then he says, let's just listen to music. And he stands there for 39 minutes listening to Time to Say Goodbye, Pavarotti, I think it was. And, just Ave Maria, right? And people are scratching their head going, what's the deal? What happened? And, I think it's fairly obvious. He didn't want to answer any more questions. He knew that he didn't have answers. And he didn't want to just do his regular rant, his rally rant, because he didn't have a teleprompter. And this was a town hall. So what does he do? He says, let's listen to music for almost an hour. After only answering 2 questions at a time. I mean, by the way, he just also backed out. This news just broke like in the last hour. He was scheduled to be on CNBC's Squawk Box, the business show. And he backed out of that one, too. And then you got, as I said, J.D. Vance, whose mentor, or this obscure political philosopher that J.D. Vance seems to worship, has argued that a reasonable way to deal with people who are, quote, not productive would be to, quote, convert them into biodiesel, which can help power the minibuses. Right. He also said that, quote, real Holocaust-free Nazism has never been tried. Just what we need, right? And as Rachel Maddow pointed out, this guy says that we need to replace our president with a chief executive officer, a CEO, and that Americans have to get over their dictator phobia. It's not like we weren't warned about these guys. Barry Goldwater in 1964, in the speech when he accepted his nomination for president, Republican nomination for president in 64, he said, and I quote, "Now those who seek absolute power, even though they seek it to do what they regard as good, are simply demanding the right to enforce their own version of heaven on earth. And let me remind you, they are the very ones who always create the most hellish tyrannies. Absolute power does corrupt, and those who seek it must be suspect and must be opposed." But here we are. I mean, Hitler publicly argued sentiments to the effect of, "I will get rid of the communist vermin. I will take care of the enemy within. Jews and migrants are poisoning Aryan blood. And one people, one nation, one leader." These were Hitler's slogans. Sound familiar? I lived in West Germany back in the 1980s. I knew people who were actually, I knew 2 people who were in the Hitler Youth, and I knew one guy who was a spy for Hitler. And, I mean, they were all horrified by what had happened and their role in it, frankly. They're all dead now. But, and my friend Armin Lehman, was the 16-year-old courier who personally delivered to Adolf Hitler the news that the war was lost and stood outside his bunker as Hitler committed suicide. It can happen here. Vote. I'll be right back.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
18 minutes past the hour. Stick around. We'll be right back. More of the news right after this.
We say fight back! addition to bringing you the Thom Hartmann program here on Free Speech TV and Video Media Online, we also have a whole set of ways you can interact with us and tools you can use to spread the word about the importance of democracy and the threats to it in our republic. First, there's your daily homework. Sue Nethercutt puts together a daily email newsletter that has a link to every story I discuss on the air, so you can find my sources and you can share them with your friends. It's free and you can sign up at thomhartmann.com. Second, I publish my daily take every day over at the hartmannreport.com website. That's also free if you want the daily 5 days a week rant in your inbox. No ads either. Third, we have the podcasts. There's the free 1-hour version of our daily show that's advertising supported. You can find that wherever you get your podcasts normally. And then there's also the podcast of the entire 3-hour show with no advertisements, and that's available by subscription over at thomhartmann.com. So check them all out at thomhartmann.com and hartmannreport.com.
Our book today in the Thom Hartmann Book Club is Homewreckers by Aaron Glantz, a Pulitzer Prize finalist. The subtitle is How a Gang of Wall Street Kingpins, Hedge Fund Magnates, Crooked Banks, and Venture Capitalists suckered millions out of their homes and demolished the American dream. It's quite a subtitle. This is from chapter 21, titled Triumph of the Homewreckers. Donald Trump took the oath of office on a chilly Friday morning, delivering an inaugural address that promised an end to the corruption and impotence that had widened America's historic wealth gap. He understood that his victory had been propelled by harnessing the public's rage and envy at having been left behind in the economic recovery, and that he promised that he would not forget it. Evoking FDR's famous Forgotten Man speech from 1932 that promised to prioritize the needs of, quote, the man at the bottom of the economic pyramid, Trump declared, quote, the forgotten men and women of our country will be forgotten no longer. Politicians had prospered, he said, but jobs had evaporated, factories closed. Quote, the establishment protected itself, but not the citizens of our country. Their victories have not been your victories. Their triumphs have not been your triumphs. And while they celebrated in our nation's capital, there was little chance to celebrate for struggling families all across our land. This all changes, starting right here and right now, Trump proclaimed, because this moment is your moment. It belongs to you. This is your day. This is your celebration. End of quote. The moment, however, belonged not to the great mass of struggling Americans, but to the new president's most ardent supporters, flamboyant businessmen who profited off the pain of the housing bust and were now poised to steer the ship of state for at least the next 4 years. As Trump reached out his hand and swore to preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution of the United States of America, his close friend and inaugural committee chair, Tom Barrack, stood behind him, smiling in a blue scarf and black overcoat. Afterward, Barack and Trump embraced at the U.S. Capitol's inaugural platform. The homewreckers had arrived. Barack didn't take an official position in the Trump administration, reportedly turning down an offer to be White House Chief of Staff, Treasury Secretary, or Ambassador to Mexico. Roger Stone told me he could have had any position he wanted, but working for the government would have meant making a lot less money. I don't think he has the belly for public service, Stone observed. Other homewreckers had no such qualms. If they changed the rules of the game now, they could make more money later. Steve Mnuchin, by now dubbed the foreclosure king by his critics, was confirmed as Treasury Secretary. His top deputy at One West, the bank, Joseph Otting, became the nation's chief bank regulator, the comptroller of the currency. Wilbur Ross, the bankruptcy tycoon who bought Florida's Bank United, became the Commerce Secretary, charged with everything from negotiating trade deals to overseeing the U.S. Census. Steve Schwarzman, the chairman of Blackstone, became chair of the White House's Strategic and Policy Forum, a group of business leaders who were to meet regularly with Trump. Jamie Dimon of J.P. Morgan Chase was named vice chair. Though the group disbanded over the summer after Trump's statement that bigotry and violence on many sides were responsible for a white nationalist's killing a counter-protester in Charlottesville, Virginia, Schwarzman, along with Barack, is said to be among a small group of outsiders, including Sean Hannity, who are put directly through to the president rather than being routed through the normal communications channels. Hannity reportedly chats with Trump nightly. Schwarzman has flown on Air Force One. On February 12, 2017, less than a month into Trump's presidency, while the commander-in-chief was dining with Prime Minister Shinzo Abe of Japan at his Mar-a-Lago golf club, Schwartzman threw a massive 70th birthday bash at his Four Winds estate, barely a mile and a half away. This time, neither Donald nor Melania Trump could make it, but daughter Ivanka and son-in-law Jared Kushner did, along with Mnuchin, Ross, and a who's who of high finance and culture, from Henry Kravis, co-founder of the hostile takeover firm Kohlberg Kravis Roberts, to the fashion designer Donatella Versace. The party featured live camels, trapeze artists, fireworks, and a gondolier. Schwartzman's tennis courts were covered with Asian-themed staging. The man who'd hired Patti LaBelle to sing Happy Birthday for his 60th was serenaded by Gwen Stefani on his 70th. After Happy Birthday, the peroxide pop star took a, quote, a quick twirl with the birthday boy around a dance floor constructed inside a two-story tent where acrobats shimmied and jumped, the New York Times reported. Unlike a decade before, when Schwartzman's glorious pre-bust bash sparked condemnation from sources as conservative as the Wall Street Journal, this time the festivities sparked very little blowback. In her story, Bloomberg reporter Amanda Gordon reveled in the comparison with Schwartzman's 60th. There were some differences, though, she wrote. Remember that beautiful fur coat on Melania Trump? It was New York in February on a weeknight. This time, no bundling required, with many folks golfing and swimming all day before a balmy night and fireworks alongside a full moon. Howard Marks, the co-chairman of Oak Tree Capital, a vulture firm that had bought and flipped 3,000 foreclosures, told Gordon, quote, "The world is an uncertain place. A lot of people are unhappy with a lot of other people. There are a lot of things that people are upset about. So it's nice to have an evening where everybody's happy, harmonious, and upbeat." End quote. There was a lot of celebrating to be had. In June, the gang got together for the marriage of Steve Mnuchin and his third wife, actress Louise Linton, almost 2 decades younger than him. And then it continues from there.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Hey, happy Wednesday. One of the reasons our media so rarely reports on the obscene things that Trump says at his rallies is that they're terrified of showing up. I want to tell you about that in a minute. This is what fascists do. Extreme power. Trump finds a new way to say he will be dictator on day one. And are Republicans flooding the polls so that they can scream fraud on election night and try and get this thing before the Supreme Court that might do what they did in 2000 and hand the Republican the election even though the Democrat won it? We'll see. We'll talk about that in the first hour. In the second hour of our program, property pirates, how billionaires are hijacking, Trump-supporting billionaires at that, are hijacking affordable housing. Also, Trump's Arlington cemetery visit is about to be outed a day after tomorrow. We're going to get the real story, or apparently, that's when the documents are supposed to be released. I'll tell you about that in the second hour. And the billionaire who owns the Los Angeles Times forbids his editorial board from endorsing Kamala Harris. What's with the billionaires these days? Well, we all know what's with them. Anyhow, in the third hour of our program, the latest Fox News live from Sean Hannity is widely believed in Trump world. Why? Have these people no frickin' memory? We'll talk about that in the third hour. And also, Trump even lies about his own kids' grades. How can anyone believe this guy? A lot going on here, and just a bunch of stuff in the news I wanted to share with you. First of all, McDonald's has a nationwide outbreak of E. coli, which can destroy your kidneys and leave you on dialysis for the rest of your life. In fact, one child has developed what's called hemolytic uremic syndrome. This is where the bacteria attacks the tiny blood vessels in the kidneys. Another person has died. So this comes the same week that Donald Trump took over a McDonald's and staged a stunt. There weren't actually any customers. The McDonald's wasn't opened. This is a McDonald's, by the way, that had failed health department tests. But anyhow, here we go. In 10 states, McDonald's is apparently poisoning people. Coincidence or conspiracy? I don't know. Also, a question, this is over on Daily Kos, and I thought by Robert Deloxy, and I thought it was really worth highlighting.
he points out, we now know that Donald Trump was sending COVID test machines. This was back when in order to do a COVID test, this was a little more than a year ago, and to do a COVID test required a $100,000, $200,000, $1 million, I don't know, very expensive piece of machinery that could amplify DNA and test for, all this to identify COVID. And he sent at least one of these machines to Vladimir Putin for his personal use. So the question that nobody's asking in the media is, where did that machine come from? Was it taken from, a hospital that then couldn't test people? Was it taken from our military? I mean, Trump couldn't just order one from a company. It had to have come from someplace. Who did Trump steal the COVID test machine from to give to Putin? Inquiring minds want to know. If you know, give us a call and let us know. I'd love to know this. Also, good news. Yesterday, Wisconsin had their first day of early voting, and guess what? They crashed the system. So many people were trying to early vote in Wisconsin that the system crashed. All the votes will be counted, nothing to worry about. You can still vote in Wisconsin, everything's good. But a lot of people who showed up to vote, on machines ended up having to do a paper ballot because they exceeded the capacity of the machines, apparently. And the Congo, the Democratic Republic of Congo, which is not quite so democratic, Donald Trump has been telling a series of lies in his campaign stump speeches. He lies with such easy facility. Anyhow, the Trump claims he started out with some bad people from the Congo are arriving at our southern borders. Okay, you can't really fact check that. There might be one Congolese person who came across the border. Who knows? But then he changed it to say the Congo is emptying its prisons, and you can't fact check that, but nobody did. I mean, he started saying this about 2 weeks ago. And then a couple days ago, he said, the Congo is delivering people to the border. So finally, a reporter, this was CNN fact checker Daniel Dale, reached out to the government of the Democratic Republic of Congo in Africa and said, any of this true? And he reports he talked to two representatives from the Congolese government. They said, quote, there is no evidence for any of these claims, end quote. And he adds, both of them were just befuddled. A spokesman for the DRC said, everything he's saying is not true. The ambassador for the Republic of Congo said, quote, there is no truth or any sign nor a single fact supporting such a claim or statement. He then reached out to the Trump campaign, and according to CNN, they have been unable to provide a single shred of proof to back up Trump's lies. Meanwhile, down in Georgia, an audit found that there are non-citizens on the voting rolls in Georgia. Holy cow, 8.2 million registered voters in the state, 20 non-citizens. 11 of them never voted, and 9 had cast ballots, but that was years ago. I mean, like a decade ago, before there were ID laws in Georgia. This is Brad Raffensperger, the Secretary of State, did this to kind of make Georgians feel, well, it's all good, don't worry. One of the more interesting stories today is over at Raw Story, why are journalists so afraid of covering Trump events? We don't hear a lot from Trump events. And in large part, it's because the media has stopped sending reporters. Why has the media, by and large, stopped sending reporters? Because they get threatened. NPR did a report on this morning, that former President Donald Trump's threats to jail journalists and control national news outlets has made work more dangerous for journalists. This is a study that was published by NPR, or pointed to by NPR. And, quote, this is from the study, quote, a hostile crowd quickly surrounded a freelance journalist at a Michigan Trump rally. They began shouting threats at her, including, I hope you're murdered, and I hope you're dismembered, and I hope someone rapes you before they murder you. Aren't these Trump followers such lovely people? The International Women's Media Foundation, which did the study, found 36%. They surveyed hundreds of journalists for this, by the way. Found 36% of them said that they have faced or been threatened with physical violence on the job, reporting that MAGA fans often carry weapons at Trump events. By the way, have you noticed how Republicans are starting to change their pronunciation of MAGA? It sounds too close to maggot. So they're now starting to say MAGA, like, you know, hey, we're in Europe now. Right. Meanwhile, Trump has pledged to jail reporters who won't identify their sources. This is what he said at a rally in Texas 2 days ago. He said, when this person realizes he's going to be the bride of another prisoner shortly, he says, he will say, I'd very much like to tell you exactly who that was. New York Times publisher A.G. Schultzberger, who is in large part responsible for Trump's, current position in the polls, because the New York Times has so assiduously and frequently and repetitively sane-washed Donald Trump. He says projections from the press could be worn away by either authoritarian leaders or by populist leaders who rally their supporters against independent media. This was Times executive editor Joseph Kahn. He told NPR's Steve Inskeep, he said, we shouldn't pretend that they're only vulnerable in a place like Hungary or Turkey. They are also vulnerable here. Right. But he's talking about independent media. Apparently these guys at the New York Times think that they are, impervious to anything. Donald Trump claims that as president, he will have unchecked extreme power, is his phrase. He says, it's called extreme power. You have extreme power as president. You say, close the border, and the border's closed. That's it. Very simple. Trump's pledge to use his extreme power, says Charles Nelson of the National Nurses United, quote, is what the Supreme Court has created by overthrowing the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence. A second term poses too big a risk for Americans to take. I mean, this is just wild stuff. It's just getting wilder and wilder every day. Deal with the devil. Trump's disturbing plans said to threaten day-to-day life. Actually, I'll get to that on the other side of this break. This and Hitler's generals, right? We'll get to that too. Stay tuned. But it's getting weirder and weirder and weirder. Tim Walsh just said if there ever was a red line, Trump has stepped across it. Yeah, he didn't step across it. He brought a battering ram. It's 16 minutes past the hour. I'll be back with more of the news of the day and your calls in just a moment. Stay tuned.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Occupying the media 3 hours a day, 5 days a week, right here. I'll be right back. And welcome back, Susie in Willits, California. Hey, Susie, what's on your mind today?
I want to list these damning critics for Trump, Mike Pence, Rex Tillerson, William Barr, General John Kelly, General Mark Milley, Mark Esper, General James Mattis, John Bolton, General H.R. Masterson, Dan Coates, Mick Mulvaney. I saw this on General, the news, GMA. I mean, it wasn't, on our talk show where we hear these stuff. It was really on
Good Morning
everyone's
America.
radar.
Yeah, no, it
was.
Increasingly, you've got these, 2, 3, 4-star generals speaking out. I worked for Trump. I knew Trump. The guy's a fascist. He will destroy American democracy. They are warned. And now John Kelly, he was Trump's longest-serving chief of staff. And a general. And, if anybody would know, John Kelly would know.
Why are people listening to this?
I think people are, Susie, and that's why I'm not terribly panicked about this election, but I am concerned. My increasing concern is not that Trump is going to, win the election, or even that he will succeed when he tries to steal the election using the Supreme Court and the House of Representatives. My increasing concern is that after Trump is pushed out of the way, a new Trump will emerge, that the Republican Party has gone full fascist. And the question in my mind is, who will be the next Republican fascist leader? Will it be Tom Cotton? Will it be Josh Hawley? Will it be Ted Cruz? Who's it going to be? But because certainly there's a bunch of them who have shown that they are perfectly willing to step into Donald Trump's shoes. Susie, thanks for the call. Mike in Elyria, Ohio. Hey, Mike, what's up?
Hey, I'm from the most corrupt state in Ohio, in the United States, and I'm not proud of it.
I think you are, yeah. Right up West Virginia is probably a close second, but yeah.
Yeah, well, you always call it is, so I believe you. My question is, I've been trying to find the Guardian report on the 2000 election, and every web page I go to says we can't show information. Is there a way around that, or? We
can't show information? What are you talking about?
Yeah, I go to the internet, and it says the Florida election was such and such and such. This is, sorry, we can't show any more information. I click that link, and it goes to a 404. So,
I don't know, Mike. Are you using Google or are you using DuckDuckGo? What search engine are you using?
DuckDuckGo, yeah.
Yeah, try using Google.
You think Google might do better?
Well, I don't know if it'll do better, but if you can't get what you want out of one search engine, there's a bunch of others. There's Bing, Microsoft's. I use Perplexity.ai a lot.
Perplexity?
Yeah,
okay.
It's an AI-based search engine, and it just does an amazing job. But it's also an AI, so sometimes you get hallucinations. Sometimes it's not quite accurate. I've had on a couple of occasions to, I'll ask it a question where I know part of the answer and it'll tell me something different, and so I'll say, well, what about this? And then it goes, oh, I'm sorry, I gave you wrong information. So
yeah, I was on psilocybin, huh?
Yeah, well, they call with AI, they call it hallucinations when they just make stuff up or say things that are not true. So that's the deal. Mike, good luck.
Thank you, Tom.
Yeah, you're welcome. Good talking to you. It is, 20 minutes past the hour. I'll be back with more of the news of the day and your calls in 60 seconds. Stay with us. Missed my opening rant today? It's usually published over at HartmannReport.com, where you can read it and share it with your friends for free. Check it out, HartmannReport.com. Back in 2010, when Viktor Orban took over the Fidesz party in Hungary, that party was sort of like the Republican Party. It was just a conventional conservative European political party. And he has turned it into a neo-fascist powerhouse. He pushed through he altered the nation's constitution to push through what we would call gerrymandering and voter suppression so that his party will always win. He campaigned on building a wall. Build a wall was literally one of his campaign slogans, and he did build a wall across the southern border of Hungary to keep out Syrian refugees who were fleeing the violence when Russia was bombing that country. His other two campaign slogans were, and I quote, "Restore Christian purity and make Hungary great again." Seriously, back in 2010, 6 years before Trump. There's an amazing backstory about how Viktor Orban is being cloned, essentially, in the GOP. You can find the article over at HartmannReport.com. Check it out.
Why is Trump praising Hitler? What's he trying to say? A man who brought destruction, took millions of lives away. John Kelly heard the whispers, the words that made him freeze. Said Hitler did some good things, like a sickness in the breeze. Why is Trump praising Hitler? What's the game he's playing? Ignoring all the suffering, the hatred he's relaying. We hear the echoes of the past, the danger's getting clearer. Why is Trump praising Hitler? Staring in the mirror.
Welcome back, 23 minutes past the hour. Deal with the devil. Donald Trump's disturbing plans to threaten day-to-day life. This is from New York Times columnist Thomas Edsall. He says former President Donald Trump represents an unprecedented threat to American civil liberties that could usher in a new era of racial violence, political tyranny. I think it's a legitimate warning. He writes, "It is the ordinary day-to-day life we lead at our kitchen table and in our bedrooms that is most dangerously threatened by the tyranny that a return of Trump to power would represent. This is the kind of tyranny that everyone who reads these words should fear most and work hardest to hold at bay." He notes that Trump has already begun to dismantle political protections that might prevent him from carrying out threats. This includes sicking the military on his perceived enemies, which could be you or me, aligning himself with dictators whose charm and patriotism he praises, dismantling the civil service, and sacrificing American influence abroad by abandoning European allies. Edsall warned that 1/3 of MAGA Republicans expect imminent civil war. 1/3. More than half of MAGA Republicans say political violence is justified. Nearly 3/4 of MAGA Republicans believe that white people face discrimination and that there's a plot to replace white people in America. Which pretty much tells you, why white people are supporting Donald Trump, or why so many white people are supporting Donald Trump. It's all about white privilege. We want to keep our white privilege, don't you know? The study says, he's quoting a study here. He says, assessments by law enforcement experts in violent domestic extremism and prior research, concern about the potential for political violence among MAGA Republicans appears to be justified. Edsall notes that there are 3 protections against a president being out of control. Number 1, White House advisors. Number 2, the threat of impeachment. And number 3, the threat of prosecution. Well, Trump is not going to have the same advisors again. He's not going to have John Kelly back. The threat of impeachment, he just shrugs because Republicans in the Senate won't convict him, so he doesn't care if he gets impeached in the House. And the threat of prosecution, the Supreme Court did away with that. So, or at least 6 Republicans on the Supreme Court did away with that. John Kelly, per our song just a moment ago, is quoted in the Atlantic as saying that he wanted Donald Trump, it's in Peter Baker and Susan Glasser's book, The Divider, Trump in the White House, that Trump asked John Kelly, a general, why can't my generals be more like Hitler's generals? John Kelly tried to patiently explain to him that Hitler's generals did what Hitler told them to do, and it was a disaster. Attacking Russia, and as a result, 3 times Hitler's generals tried to assassinate Hitler. Trump didn't know this, and he didn't believe it. He said, no, they were totally loyal to him. That's what Trump told John Kelly. Meanwhile, over at Fox, Brian Kilmeade says if Trump becomes president and he gets generals like Hitler's generals, quote, that would be great. Seriously. This is Brian Kilmeade, quote, he would say, it's not your job to rein in the president, it's your job to do what the president wants. It would be great to have German generals that actually do what we ask them to do. Thank you, Fox News. We understand who you are and what you're all about. There is some concern about the polling out there, the Republicans flooding the polls. I'll tell you about that on the other side of the break, and I'll pick up your calls. What's on your mind today? Stick around.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
Helping you win the water cooler wars on the other side of this break. Stay with us. Welcome to the Thom Hartmann University Book Club. Today we're reading from Settlers, The Mythology of the White Proletariat.
Proletariat, The True Story of the White Nation by J. Sakai, published by Morningstar Press in 1989. This is from Chapter 2, The Foundations of Settler Life. The life of European settlers and the class structure of their society was abnormal because it was dependent upon a foundation of conquest, genocide, and enslavement. The myth of the self-sufficient white settler family clearing the wilderness and supporting themselves through their own initiative and hard labor is a propaganda fabrication. It is the absolute characteristic of settler society to be parasitic, dependent upon the super-exploitation of oppressed peoples for its style of life. Never has Euro-American society completely supported itself. This is the decisive factor in the consciousness of all classes and strata of white society from 1600 to now. Settler society was raised up above the level of backward old Europe by a foundation of conquest. This conquest was a miracle drug for a Europe convulsed with the reaction of decaying feudalism and deadly capitalism. Shot into the veins of the Spanish feudal nation, for instance, the miracle drug of the New World conquest gave Spain the momentary power to overrun North Africa, Holland, and Italy before her historical incident waned. Like many such fixes for Euro-Americans, this conquest was addicting. It was habit-forming and rapidly indispensable, not only culturally, but in the mechanism of an oppressor society whose lifeblood was new conquest. We'll examine this later in the relationship of settlerism to imperialism. For now, it's enough to see that this conquest is a material act of great magnitude, an economic and social event as important as the emergence of the factory system or the exploitation of petroleum in the Middle East. We stress the obvious here because the Euro-American settlers have always made light of their invasion and occupation, although the conquered territory is the precondition for their whole society. Traditionally, European settler societies throw off the propaganda smoke screens that they didn't really conquer and dispossess other nations. They claim with false modesty that they merely moved into vacant territory. So the early English settlers depicted America as empty, a howling wilderness, unsettled, sparsely populated, just waiting with a vacant sign on the door for the first lucky civilization to walk in and claim it. Theodore Roosevelt wrote defensively in 1900, quote, "The settler and pioneer have at bottom had justice on their side. This great continent could not have been kept as nothing but a game preserve for squalid savages," end of quote. It is telling that this lie is precisely the same lie put forward by white Afrikaner settlers who claim that South Africa was literally totally uninhabited by any Africans when they arrived from Europe. To universal derision, these European settlers claim to be the only rightful historic inhabitants of South Africa. Or we can hear similar defenses put forward by the European settlers of Israel, who claim that much of the Palestinian land and buildings they occupy are rightfully theirs, since the Arabs had allegedly decided to voluntarily abandon it all during the 1948-49 war. Are these kinds of tales any less preposterous than those put forward by Euro-American settlers? America was spacious and sparsely populated only because the European invaders destroyed whole civilizations and killed off millions of Native Americans to get the land and profits they wanted. We all know that when the English arrived in Virginia, for example, they encountered an urban, village-dwelling society far more skilled than they were in the arts of medicine, agriculture, fishing, and government. This civilization was reflected in a chain of 300 Indian nations and peoples stretching from the Arctic Circle to the tip of South America, many of whom had highly developed societies. There was, in fact, a greater population in these Indian nations in 1492 than in all of Western Europe. Recent scholarly estimates indicate that at the time of Columbus, there were 100 million Indians in the hemisphere, 10 million in North America, 25 million in Central Mexico, and an additional 65 million elsewhere in Central and South America. These numbers have long been concealed since they give rise to the logical question of what happened to this great mass of people. The European invaders, Spanish, Dutch, English, Portuguese, and French, simply killed off millions and millions to safeguard their conquest of the land and provide the disposable slave labor they needed to launch their new world. Conservative Western historical estimates show that the Spanish reduced, in quotes, the Indian population of their colonies from some 50 million to only 4 million by the end of the 17th century. And from the 10 million Indians who once inhabited North America, after 4 centuries of settler invasion and rule, there were in 1900 perhaps 200,000 to 300,000 surviving descendants in the United States. This was the very substantial down payment towards the continuing blood price that third world nations have to pay to sustain the Euro-American way of life. So when we hear that the settlers pushed out the Indians or forced the Indians to leave their traditional hunting grounds, we know that these are just code phrases to refer politely to the most barbaric genocide imaginable. It could well be the greatest crime in all of human history. Only here, the Adolf Eichmanns and Heinrich Himmlers had names like Benjamin Franklin and Andrew Jackson. The point is that genocide was not an accident, not an excess, not the unintended side effect of virile European growth. Genocide was the necessary and deliberate act of the capitalists and their settler shock troops. The book Settlers. Did you know that every weekday we send out an email before the show giving you all the topics coming up so you can be fully informed and ready to interact with our program? Or that after the show we send out Sue's Stack, a list of every topic I've discussed along with clickable hot links to every source of information I've shared with you on the air? It's all completely free and available at thom.tv, thom.tv. Check it out.
In the shadows of the east, a man stands tall, a bronze iron grip making democracies fall. Crushing dissent as he tightens the chains. Gold P takes notes trying to play the same game. He built a wall to keep refugees at bay, calls them rapists while his followers pray. With media in his hands, courts by his side, the future they see is nowhere to hide. Strong man dreams, they're setting the stage. Trump and Orban turning the page. Hungary's path, the glimpse of tomorrow. Freedom fading, it's a tale of sorrow. If you wanna see what they plan to do, look to Hungary, the nightmare's coming true.
Well, hopefully not. Hopefully not. 35 minutes past the hour. It's interesting. We're seeing this alleged shift in the polls, showing that there's more and more support for Donald Trump. And David McAfee, I'm not sure which, writing over at Raw Story, says that numerous experts are saying that this is just BS. What's happening is that there are a bunch of phony Republican polls that are dumping numbers into, saying here's our latest poll, and they're overwhelmingly pro-Trump, and that these are skewing the polling averages, and that the reason that they're doing this is the same reason that Republicans in 3 major swing states, I believe it's Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin. I'm sure of Pennsylvania. I'm not sure of Michigan and Wisconsin, but 3 of the major swing states, Republicans have gotten laws passed, and this was back 4 or 5 years ago, got laws passed saying that you can't count mail-in votes, absentee votes, until the day of the election. And in some cases, you can't count them until after the election is closed. Why? Because they don't want the results to come in on the first day. They want the results to come in not on Tuesday night, but on Wednesday or Thursday or Friday. Now, why would Republicans want that? So that they can use that time to scream fraud. So they can use that time to claim that Trump actually won and we need to stop counting the votes. So they can use that time to organize court challenges to ultimately get this election in front of their 6 toadies on the U.S. Supreme Court. That is their plan. They don't plan on winning the majority of the votes. That's why, these phony polls are phony baloney. They plan on winning. And by the way, it's not going to be a clown show run by Rudy Giuliani this time. The lawyers and law firms that the Republicans are hiring in these swing states to challenge these elections are some of the, we're talking, $2, $3, $5, $10,000 an hour lawyers from some of the top law firms in America. Are going to be trying to get fascism installed in the United States in the form of Donald Trump. Scary stuff. But I believe we're going to prevail. I really do. What say you? Let's pick up your calls here. Blue in Santa Cruz, California. Hey, Blue, what's up?
Good morning.
Hey.
I've been hearing about this 2025 project, or the 1825 project. I hear little snippets of it and stuff, and I haven't done the research because I think it might be phony. Because, I mean, you're savvy enough, you could sit down and write the same thing opposite to scare the pants off the Reds. So is this thing really something, or is it just another phony thing?
The Heritage Foundation started producing these in 1980. They produced one in 1980 for the Reagan presidency. And at that time, it was called A Mandate for Leadership. That was the title of it. They give it a different title every year. And the Mandate for Leadership had a whole bunch of things that the right-wing billionaires who fund the Heritage Foundation wanted Ronald Reagan to do. And he did over 70% of them. So, yeah, it's a real thing. And they have produced these. They produced a set of them for the George Herbert Walker Bush administration. They produced one for the George W. Bush administration, which was largely followed. And now the one that they've produced for the Donald Trump administration is called Project 2025. So, yeah, Blue, it's absolutely deadly serious. Some of the richest men in America are behind it. And they are dead serious about, replacing American democracy with an authoritarian, a Viktor Orban, Vladimir Putin style of government here in the United States. They are totally in on it, in for it.
Okay, so they can put that into law in the near future if they make it in.
Well, not just put it into law. That would require Congress. Large chunks of it are things that can be done simply by the president through executive orders or executive actions. And even those that technically can't be done by the president might be able to be done by the president anyway, since the Supreme Court gave so much more power to the presidency. So, yeah, this is
Supreme Court is neither supreme or a court.
There you go. There you go. I'm with you. Blue, thank you for the call. Spot on. John in Portland. Hey, John, what's up?
Hi, good morning. Here's the MAGA plan to steal the election. I think Joe Biden needs to be ready for it. What they're going to do is blow up some election offices so that the votes can't be counted. And then Supreme Court immediately will invoke the 14th Amendment, and then Trump will be president and pardon the people who blow up the election office.
Yeah, you mean the 12th Amendment.
You need to be ready for it.
Yeah.
The 12th, yeah.
It wouldn't surprise me. They tried to they had set bombs outside the DNC and the RNC the morning of January 6th. And, thank God they didn't go off. But, and we're still looking for the bomber, that person who looks so much like Marjorie Taylor Greene. Well, who knows? I mean, it apparently had the same shoes, but, anyhow, we're still trying. I don't think it was Marjorie Taylor Greene, by the way, for the record. But we're still trying to figure out, who placed those bombs. The FBI is still looking around, and so, John, I'm not going to dismiss your concerns. I don't fully share them, but I'm not going to dismiss them. Thank you for the call, Mark in Asbury Park, New Jersey. Hey, Mark, what's up?
Hi, Tom. It's a pleasure and a privilege to talk to you. I look at you when I get the time, and I'm looking at you today. And I just got a question for you. And excuse me if I talk fast, so I'm going to try to slow it down. What I would love if the Democratic Party would, put that. I want to ask you your opinion. All of the Republicans that was down with Trump in 2016, now they're against him. And they made public statements. Even his vice president said that Trump is an American Hitler. His chief of staff is not voting for them. My question to you, Tom, is that why they don't run political ads on a loop, about the people that said negative things about Trump that was with Trump in 2016 and decided not to vote for Trump in 2020 and now in 2024.
I think if you look at the advertising in the swing states, which is pretty much where all of the presidential advertising is going on. I mean, you're not seeing it in New Jersey. I'm not seeing it here in Oregon because our states are going to go, for Kamala Harris no matter what. But in Michigan and Wisconsin and in Georgia and the various swing states, Pennsylvania, there's an awful lot of these ads, and most of the Kamala Harris ads now are focusing on abortion. They're starting to swing more in the direction of Donald Trump as a threat to democracy, and in that they're starting to quote people like John Kelly. And I expect there will be more of that. But what they found is that people respond most vigorously to things that are close to home. And, pretty much everybody has a woman or a girl in their family that, could potentially be raped and impregnated. And that's a big concern, that with these very, very strict abortion bans. And not to mention, people just, women get pregnant and they want to have babies and they have complications from their pregnancy or they have a miscarriage and what? They end up getting prosecuted. I mean, Mississippi and Alabama have prosecuted dozens of women for having miscarriages, claiming that they were trying to have abortions and things. So, that's where they're focusing, Mark. Go ahead.
Okay, so for them to play J.D. Vance as his vice president choice, when he called him an American Hitler, that wouldn't have no effect, on a loop over and over again.
Well, if
his own vice president, and now he's not saying it because he's his vice president choice.
Right. The big question is, what's the goal of the advertising, right? Some advertising has the goal of mobilizing the base, getting the base out. That's what Trump is doing. Most of Trump's advertising is to mobilize the base. That's why he's trashing trans people, for example, and black people. The Democrats need to do that, in my opinion, and I'm with you on that. But I think right now what they're focusing on are people in the middle, as it were. The undecided voters, the weak Republicans, the Romney Republicans who are put off by Donald Trump but haven't yet decided he's so bad they can't vote for him. And that's a lot of people. And so that's who they're going after, Mark. And that's I think why the ads, are the way that they are. You have to, whenever you look at a political ad, you have to ask the question, who's the target of this ad? What kind of behavior are they trying to encourage? So.
Yeah. Well, Tom, thank you very much. That's why I call you. You're a very intelligent brother, and God bless you and the family. And
thank you, Mark. I appreciate the blessing. Thank you. I'll take all I can get. I appreciate it. Thank you. It's 44 minutes past the hour, almost 45. I'll be back with you in just a second. Stay with us.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit ThomHartmann.com for audio and video archives.
Defending America from the weapons of mass deception. I'll be right back with you. And welcome back. Peter in Winchester, Virginia. Hey, Peter, what's on your mind today?
Okay. Well, this is what I got, and I'd like to get your reaction. If Trump wins, and there has been little or no public talk about what we'll then have to do to remove him. Nobody's talking about that. I can't believe it. I haven't heard it. We'll have to remove him in some way or other to save the country. Now, it's a horrible thing to have to think about.
I don't think it's going to happen, Peter. I mean, I'm assuming, first of all, that you're not talking about, removing him by violence, which leaves impeachment or the 25th Amendment. I think there's a real high probability that J.D. Vance and the 25th Amendment has to be initiated by the Vice President, because it was the reason for the 25th Amendment was, what happens if the President suffers a stroke, for example. He's still alive, but he can't talk anymore, or he can't even understand what people are saying to him anymore. So what do? Well, the Vice President says that the President is infirm. It gets thrown to the Cabinet, essentially, and the Cabinet has to vote, a majority vote, along with the Vice President, that the President can no longer serve as President, and then, boom, the Vice President becomes President. I think there's a very high probability that J.D. Vance would do that. I don't think he'd do it in the first week, but I think he would certainly do it within the first year. And so that's a possibility. But the only other way is by impeachment. And I don't see I think if Democrats take the House and the Senate, knock wood, God willing, still the Republicans would probably filibuster the impeachment. I mean, they blocked the impeachment last time, both impeachments.
Well, the point that I wanted to make was that if he gets elected again, we have no nobody's talking about what we can do. But what I think is it'll have to be some version of the original American Revolution. Again.
Well, you think people are going to show up in the streets with guns and start shooting at police? I don't think so. I don't think it's a good idea.
I don't know. No, I don't think it's a good idea either. All I'm saying is that if there's no clear method to remove him, the real reason to vote, and a very important reason to vote, is to disable him from getting elected so that we don't have to become George Washington's army again.
Yeah. Well, keep in mind,
And
George
nobody
Washington's
talks about
army
that.
took on the largest military in the world at the time and ultimately defeated it. You're not going to see Americans taking on well, actually, let me rephrase that. If Kamala Harris is elected, there is a possibility. I mean, you've got, 1/3 of Trump MAGA followers, are just, they both expect there to be a civil war and are willing to participate in it, or believe that political violence is acceptable. So I think the odds of, political violence, actual political violence breaking out are much higher if Kamala Harris is elected than if Donald Trump is elected, because by and large, Democrats are not well armed, and they're not willing to use political violence. They would prefer to do things the right way. So it is concerning.
The important point is that we can disable that by voting.
Yeah, there you go. There you go.
Hey, thanks so much for sharing our program and for reaching out to our stations and sponsors and letting them know that you're listening. It really means a lot to us. So remember the John Durham investigation in which he said, the FBI never should have looked into Donald Trump's connections to Russia. And I'm scratching my head going, how can he even think this? I mean, the guy that Donald Trump hired as his first campaign manager, Paul Manafort had taken $66 million from oligarchs associated with Vladimir Putin to install Viktor Yanukovych as the dictator of Ukraine. $66 million. He took money from, he was paid $1 million by the dictator of Zaire, back when it was Zaire, to develop a strong relationship with Moscow. And when finally they threw Yanukovych out of Ukraine, that was in 2015, what did Manafort do? He came to the United States and he said to Donald Trump, well, let me help you, while he's taking money from Moscow. I mean, if nothing else, that should have been a starting point, a huge starting point for the FBI. There's a whole rant about this over at HartmannReport.com. Check it out.
In a world where truth is fading, lies become the new sensation. Repeat them till they're real, a twisted kind of revelation. From the days of Goebbels' whispers to the modern day charade, politicians spin their stories in this deceitful masquerade. Misinformation machine.
Welcome back, 9 minutes before the hour. Picking up your calls here. Leonard in, won't say? Okay. Leonard, what's up? Leonard? Going once? Going twice? All right, Glenn in Bethesda, Maryland. Hey, Glenn, what's on your mind today?
Hey, Tom. I called a couple of years ago, and I had a conversation with you where I said the American people have to do what Lincoln said, is disenthrall themselves. And I think, I honestly think at this point, we on the left, progressives, Democrats, have to start talking about that the general sense of this is a charade. Yesterday, John Kelly, his chief of staff, said he's a wannabe Hitler. His actual actual VP running mate said this about him. Yet these aren't continuous stories in the corporate media. It's the same with everything. Where is the stories about that he's an adjudicated rapist? Where are the stories that he's got 34 counts of felonies? If this had been, just imagine for a second, if the chief of staff of Kamala Harris came out yesterday and said that she's a wannabe Hitler, she doesn't respect the Constitution. Indeed, I've heard her say that she wants to terminate the Constitution. You couldn't turn on corporate media or open up the New York Times or the Wall Street Journal without weeks and weeks of attacks.
Yeah.
So what's really going on here? We're living in a charade of propaganda, and the American people better wake up. It seems there is nothing Donald Trump can do where there isn't a news story to follow on the next day, and that's the mechanics of the charade. This is going to be decided simply by corporate heads. Whatever they want to do over the next couple of weeks, which way they want to send the election. This is an inverted totalitarian state, like Sean Wilentz has said, and I'm not sure why we're not talking about this, why I can't convince people I know that if any of this stuff was a Democrat doing it, they would be destroyed. And the mechanics of that destruction would be the New York Times couldn't find font big enough every day for weeks to destroy them. Just the fact that Joe Biden was destroyed for a bad debate, I admit it was a bad debate, and it was nonstop. Every single broadcast channel started every night with that. Yeah. Every newspaper started with that. Donald Trump gets free passes because the people who run this country want him to have a free pass. We're living in a charade, and instead of talking about the particulars that look what Donald Trump said today, look what's happening now, look at the violence that they may do.
I got what you're saying, Glenn. You're starting to get redundant. The simple fact is that Steve Bannon laid out this strategy in the first year of the Trump administration. He said we're going to flood the zone with, he used the S word, I'll say crap, and that's going to be the Trump strategy, to so overwhelm the media with everything. Tom? It's working. It has always worked. Why is it working? It worked in Italy for Berlusconi. It worked in Hungary for Orban.
Why did it work there?
I beg your pardon?
It's the corporate power. Why can't we say it? Why can't we say that the moneyed interest,
I am saying
banking or oil?
You're saying it. It's frankly, a large part of the problem is that the New York Times won't say it, that the elite media is afraid to say it. And I think it's because they don't want to lose their power and credibility with the with the Republican Party, frankly. It's the same thing with the television networks. Glenn, I get your concern. Thanks for the call. Kevin in Will Frederick, Maryland. Hey, Kevin,
It's actually Frederick, Maryland, Tom. I'm sorry about that.
Oh, that's quite all right. So what's up?
My question is real quick. Do you think that Elon Musk is too rich to go to prison? I'm referring to the idea that, well, the lottery in the swing states.
Right.
And if you could say something about the 21st century robber barons and the threat that they pose, and why no one's talking about it. We both know that Donald Trump is not going to complete a full term, but J.D. Vance is very much tied into these guys.
Sure. No, I agree with your sentiment that Elon Musk is too rich to go to prison. And Donald Trump has shown the billionaires of America how to do this. I mean, he committed literally hundreds of crimes right in front of all of us, and he's being held to account for a small handful of them, and he's been able to hold those off for 4, 5, 6, 7 years. And if you've got enough money, I mean, Trump has spent hundreds of millions of dollars on lawyers. Most people don't have those kind of resources. In fact, very, very few people have those kind of resources. Elon Musk does. So, yes, it's quite clear that he broke the law, is breaking the law every single day in Pennsylvania by basically paying people to vote for Trump, to register and vote for Trump. There's criminal statute that's black and white. But will he pay a price for it? I don't think so. I think Jimmy Carter was right 7 years ago when he came on this program and he said America is no longer a democracy. It's now an oligarchy as a result of Citizens United. We have bought-off politicians. We have, media that is controlled by right-wing billionaires. Big case in point this morning, the Los Angeles Times, the billionaire who owns it saying, no, you will not endorse Kamala Harris. I mean, this is grim stuff, and it largely has been brought to us by 5 right-wing Republicans on the Supreme Supreme Court with Citizens United and a few other decisions. Kevin, I got to run, but thank you. Thank you for pointing it out. We'll continue on the other side of the break. Property pirates, how billionaires are, Trump supporting billionaires are hijacking affordable housing. Stick around.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann.
In addition to bringing you the Thom Hartmann program here on Free Speech TV and Video Media Online, we also have a whole set of ways you can interact with us and tools you can use to spread the word about the importance of democracy and the threats to it in our republic. First, there's your daily homework. Sue Nethercutt puts together a daily email newsletter that has a link to every story I discuss on the air, so you can find my sources and you can share them with your friends. It's free and you can sign up at ThomHartmann.com. Second, I publish my daily take every day over at the HartmannReport.com website. That's also free if you want the daily 5 days a week rant in your inbox. No ads either. Third, we have the podcasts. There's the free 1-hour version of our daily show that's advertising supported. You can find that wherever you get your podcasts normally. And then there's also the podcast of the entire 3-hour show with no advertisements, and that's available by subscription over at ThomHartmann.com. So check them all out at ThomHartmann.com and HartmannReport.com.
Go. Our book today is Microtrends Squared by Mark Penn. The first chapter, The Building Blocks of Change Today, The Power of Microtrends. We live in a microtrends world. It's driven by granular, often opposite patterns of human behavior that seem small but punch above their size. We've identified these powerful patterns as microtrends, and the world is full of them. Together they are the dots of a global impressionist painting that comes to life when you step back and look at it holistically. These forces have only become more impactful in recent years, and they've started to upend society. 10 years ago, when I first identified these patterns in change and microtrends, I saw a world of boundless opportunities. I was over-the-top optimistic about how microtrends would produce a new world of personalized products on our shelf, and how in Washington they would produce an even greater selection of fresh, first-rate political choices. Of course, that's not exactly what happened. Instead, the information age has given way to the disinformation age, in which fake information abounds. The nation founded on free speech is grappling with how to live with free speech in the era of the internet troll. The optimism around our economy faded with the unexpected crash of 2008, followed by a historically slow recovery over a decade. Only now is it recovering. Unparalleled consumer choice is leading not to the growth of more startups, but to the dominance of just a few internet companies, which are amassing more and more power on the basis of data gleaned from willing but unknowing consumers. And the older generations, who in their own youth led a rebellion, have now dug in their heels against the politics and culture of today's new generations. What makes the microtrend such a powerful tool in this moment is that it can unpack and explain changes that we're seeing that otherwise make no sense. On the surface, for example, the middle class can seem to be shrinking, and this is alarming. But it is only by digging deeper and seeing that education is driving more people into the upper classes that we can come to understand these overall statistics at a more molecular level. Often, two diametrically opposed trends are occurring at the same time, which would be invisible in the averages, but which leap out when understood as the result of a cauldron of microtrends. Today in politics, for example, there is no overall ideological shift. Instead, one group of moderates became more conservative and another group became more liberal, causing society to become both more liberal and more conservative at the same time, essentially canceling each other out. This increased polarization then produces even more gridlock and confusion. We can see similar tugs and pulls throughout society. While one group seeks more technology, another one wants to sit in the Amtrak quiet car. Some can't sit through a 6-second commercial. Others spend hours and hours binge-watching TV. Some live in a world of globalization, while others yearn for a return to greater nationalism. To explain all this, we've borrowed from Newtonian physics. For every trend, there is a counter-trend. It's human nature in the information age. Every move or desire in one direction seems to inspire a counter-move by another group in the opposite direction. For every radical group, there's a new conservative group. For every new product in mobile technology, there are those sticking to the flip phone. Only by understanding the complexity of these developments can we make sense of a world that seems senseless, confused, and even jumbled. While in 2007, microtrends allowed you to navigate the changes of the day, now microtrends squared lets you better understand the emerging chaos as the seesawing of opposite forces fighting for dominance in the social, political, and cultural worlds. In the last decade, technology was able to exploit and even conquer the world of microtrends with its ability to customize products and our lives based on AI and big data. But even as these attempts have transformed our lifestyles, they've also led to some serious unintended consequences that have further clouded society. Microtrends disentangles many of these shifts and lies at the source of many battles for power that have disrupted our world today. As you'll see throughout this book, those ongoing battles will result in some very unlikely winners, losers, and shifts in the overall power match of society. While the technology behind increased personalization of goods and services has been providing us with more choice in our daily life, we've instead been making fewer choices, burrowing into comfortable silos. We expected that the advances in our ability to customize goods and services would open us all up to a new world of never-ending experimentation. A decade later, exactly the opposite has occurred, and our society has become increasingly polarized, with people finding choices they like and picking them over and over again. In 2007, microtrends explained how the Starbucks economy had succeeded the Ford economy. In the Ford economy, you could have any color you wanted as long as it was black. The aim of industry was to mass-produce products at the lowest possible cost, and that meant standardization of goods. But the new economy of the 21st century was moving starkly away from that model, instead providing consumers with any color they wanted. The Starbucks economy was based on creating greater value through customization, even of simple products like coffee and tea. People everywhere became more individualistic in their tastes and were rebelling from carefully mowed lawns and white picket fences. The marketplace responded to these trends by allowing people to have it their own way, and they did. The theory was that more choice would result in a happier and more satisfied group of consumers. Variety would open consumers up to new experiences, in many ways bringing us closer together, allowing us to mix, match, and try out all sorts of new options. Something rather surprising happened, however, as consumers got more choice. The book Microtrends Squared.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Welcome to Hour 2 of our program. Property Pirates, how Trump's billionaires are hijacking affordable housing. That's the title of my op-ed today over at HartmannReport.com. America's morbidly rich billionaires are at it again, screwing the average person's family's ability to have decent, affordable housing. You know, Canada, New Zealand, Singapore, and Denmark have all done something about this. They have, in varying degrees and in varying ways, outlawed billionaires, hedge funds, big banks, foreign investors from buying residential housing in their countries. We should do the same thing here. I mean, housing is an essential part of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. I noted, I think on Monday, I talked about this, how it's actually in my new book, The Hidden History of the American Dream. When my dad bought his first home, in the 1950s. It was 1957. I was 6 years old. The median price of a single-family home at that time was 2.2 times the American median family income. And my recollection is that my dad was making around $7,000 a year, which is good money back then, and he bought that house for $13,000 a year, which is about that. It's the house cost about twice what his annual salary was. That was normal in the 1950s. Today, the median house sells for $417,000, and the median income, American income, is $40,000. That's a ratio of 10 to 1 rather than a ratio of 2 to 1. So housing has become 5 times more expensive than it was in the 1950s. Now, that's pretty substantial, right? But it really has exploded since George W. Bush crashed the housing market in 2008. When that happened, one of the big banks came out with this report saying that this is the new opportunity, right? Buy single-family homes. And the billionaires, the right-wing billionaires, the hedge funds, and the big banks have jumped into this with both feet. There's a new report that just came out day before yesterday from Popular Democracy and the Institute for Policy Studies. And let me just quote. This is from the report itself, not from me. This is the report from these two organizations. Quote, billionaire-backed private equity firms worm their way into different segments of the housing market to extract ever-increasing rents and value from multifamily rental, single-family homes, and mobile home park communities. Global billionaires purchase billions in U.S. real estate to diversify their asset holdings, driving the creation of luxury housing that functions as safety deposit boxes in the sky. Estimates of hidden wealth are as high as $36 trillion globally, with billions parked in U.S. land and housing markets. Quote, wealthy investors are acquiring property and holding units vacant, so that in many communities, the number of vacant units greatly exceeds the number of unhoused people. Nationwide, there are 16 million vacant homes, 28 vacant homes for every unhoused person. Quote, billionaire investors are buying up large segments of the short-term rental market, preventing local residents from living in these homes in order to cash in on tourism. These are not small owners with one unit, but corporate owners with multiple properties. And, quote, billionaire investors and corporate landlords are targeting communities of color and low-income residents in particular, with rent increases, high rates of eviction, and unhealthy living conditions. What's more, billionaire-owned private equity firms are investing in subsidized housing, enjoying tax breaks and public benefits, while raising rents and evicting low-income tenants from housing they are only required to keep affordable temporarily. Everywhere you look in America, you're seeing this problem. We're seeing homelessness all over this country. And it turns out that 32% is the magic number that triggers homelessness. When the cost of housing in a community exceeds 32% of the average income in that community, homelessness begins to grow. It's mathematically measurable. And this is from a study by Zillow. And they say across the country, the rent burden already exceeds the 32% of median income threshold in 100 out of 386 markets included in this analysis. They write, this is from Zillow, quote, this research demonstrates that the homeless population climbs faster when rent affordability, the share of income people spend on rent, crosses certain thresholds, in this case 32%. In many areas beyond these thresholds, even modest rent increases can push thousands more Americans into homelessness. And, I quote from articles in the Wall Street Journal and, a book about this, the Bank of International Settlements, the Blackstone Group, which is, largely owned and run by billionaire Steven Schwarzman, who's a big supporter of Donald Trump. Blackstone Group is now the world's largest real estate investment firm. At the time, they were buying $150 million worth of American houses every week, trying to spend over $10 billion. This is from the study from Popular Democracy and the Institute for Policy Studies. Quote, Blackstone, billionaire Steven Schwarzman's Blackstone is the largest corporate landlord in the world with a vast and diversified real estate portfolio. It owns more than 300,000 residential units across the U.S., has $1 trillion in global assets, and nearly doubled its profits in 2021.
Blackstone owns 149,000 multifamily apartment units, 63,000 single-family homes, 70 mobile home parks with 13,000 lots, and student housing through the American campus communities with 144,300 beds in 205 properties. They recently acquired 95,000 properties of subsidized housing. So they're getting into the business where Jared Kushner and his dad made their fortunes. In 2018, we don't have more recent numbers right now, but in 2018, corporations and the billionaires that own or run them bought 1 out of every 10 homes sold in America. And it's gotten worse every year since then. And as I said, this all took place when Morgan Stanley in 2011 published a report titled The Rentership Society, arguing that the big new investment opportunity for billionaires, banks, and hedge funds was single-family homes. Because people have to have them. I mean, you'll do just about anything to not end up sleeping on the street, including paying, half your paycheck over to a landlord. And as a result, Warren Buffett, KKR, the Carlyle Group, they've all jumped into residential real estate in a big way. John Hussein, who is the owner of Economics and Politics Inc., told the Tennessean newspaper, what you have are neighborhoods that are essentially unregulated apartment houses. It could be disastrous for the city. As Zillow found, quote, the areas that are most vulnerable to rising rents, unaffordability, and poverty hold 15% of the U.S. population and 47% of people experiencing homelessness. In other words, the more the billionaires invade the housing market, and they are doing it like, it's like, cockroaches overrunning the kitchen, right? The more the billionaires dominate the housing market, the more you see homelessness. You're driving down the street and you see homeless people by the side of the street. You see tents out there by the side of the freeway. It's billionaire investors that are largely driving this process. So what do we do about this? We outlaw it. It's very simple. You say, okay, you can own 3 single-family homes in America, period. Or 5, maybe. Let's have a conversation about this in America. We have never actually had a conversation about whether housing should be a right, not a privilege, whether housing should be protected by government, whether this is an appropriate role for government to intervene. I think it is. I realize libertarians and Republicans will say it's not. I get that. I know the argument. But Canada, Denmark, Singapore, New Zealand, they have all said no more foreign investors, no more corporate investors. Housing is for living in. Homes are to live in. Homes are for families. Enough of this, hey, we can make billions, hundreds of billions of dollars by screwing renters. Enough of that. It's time to end this scam by these Trump-supporting right-wing billionaires who are just distorting our housing market like crazy. What say you? I'll be back on the other side of the break. Stay tuned.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
It looks like we may find out what happened at Arlington Cemetery on Friday. Stay tuned. And welcome back. Charles in Vancouver, Washington. Hey, Charles, what's on your mind today?
Hey, Tom. Good morning or good afternoon for your listeners and viewers. I called you. We spoke about a week before last about the Teamster endorsement of our local candidates here in the Portland, Vancouver area. And what I researched was that, from what I read, don't know if it's true or not, since 1996, the Teamsters on a national level have always supporting a Democratic candidate.
Right.
So here in our local area, online and also on the latest Teamster publication, the newspaper, they both local 206, 162, my former, local 58, also a former, all endorsed the Democratic congressional candidates, Perez here in Vancouver and Bynum on your side of the bridge.
Oh, that's great.
So my contention is that those two guys wearing 162 polo shirts on the constant television ads supporting Miss DeReamer, I got to think they got paid off, Tom. They took money, because I don't understand why a business agent for the local would step out on their own and endorse candidates.
I don't understand why the local hasn't sued to stop it. I mean, you're representing that the local has endorsed the Republican when, in fact, the local has endorsed the Democrats, if I'm understanding what you're saying correctly, Charles.
Yeah, that is true, sir. And I'm not going to mention the name of the business agent because one used to be my representative. But, yeah, I don't. This is one of those things where I say I don't get it. And, some degree of corruption wouldn't be out of the question at all. So,
well, there's Teamsters who support Trump. I mean, and support Republicans. Yeah. I mean, you can't deny that.
No, sir. Well, I will say lastly that I have never wished more for the political ads to cease and the car dealer ads and all the mattress stores to come back into view, because
yes. Bring back the mattress stores. I'm with you.
All right, sir. Thanks for fighting the good fight.
You're welcome. Thanks for the call. Mark in Tucson, Arizona. Hey, Mark, what's up?
Oh, can you hear me?
I can.
Okay, great. Hi, Tom. Mark from Arizona. This morning, I am as shocked as I was in 2008 and 2010 when Obama changed the public option on Obamacare, and then we lost the Citizens United. Zoom forward. This morning, Kamala Harris was asked the question, would she pardon Trump? And she balked on the answer. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can.
Oh, I'm sorry. She balked on the answer, and I'm freaked out.
Well, she balked on the answer because if she says yes, it's going to piss off a lot of Democrats, and if she says no, it's going to piss off a lot of Republicans. And if she doesn't answer it, it doesn't become a news event. So she was basically denying them an opportunity to turn this into a news event. I wouldn't worry about it, Mark. I don't think there's a chance in hell she will pardon Trump. I really don't. Wow. I mean, she's a former prosecutor. She puts people in prison for a living. I'm not worried about it. Mark, thanks a lot for the call. Change starts with you. You can be calling your Democratic or Republican representatives to let them know what you think by calling 202-224-3121. It's the Capitol switchboard. It'll get you right through to them. Everybody's all excited about how Kamala Harris and Tim Walz are doing so well in the polls, and there's so much energy around the Democratic candidacy, and that's great. And we need to keep that up. And Trump seems to be going down in flames, the fat Elvis phase of his life or his career. But it's important to realize that over $6 billion has been raised so far in dark money from mostly right-wing billionaires and big corporations, and none of it has been spent yet. September, October, it's coming. There's a tsunami of dark money coming, and we need to get ready for it. And the big way to get ready for it is to double down on registering people to vote, phone banking, sending out postcards, talking to neighbors and friends, getting the word out, because it's gonna come down to people. It's going to come down to people power. There's a whole article about this called "Will Democracy Survive the Tsunami of Dark Right-Wing Money Coming This Fall?" over at HartmannReport.com. Check it out.
fight, buying up the homes, keeping them out of sight. Families locked out, watching dreams drift away, while billionaires hoard every place we try to stay. Property pirates, hijacking what's ours, turning homes into towers, reaching for the stars. They take what's meant for all of us, turning shelter into gold dust. They steal our streets, they raise the stakes. Property pirates, how much more will they take?
Yeah, it's the property pirates. I'm telling you, these Trump-supporting billionaires who are buying up housing all across the country. It's a mess. All right, there was this story a couple weeks ago. Donald Trump went to Arlington National Cemetery and illegally, the rules are very, very clear. You can't use this cemetery for campaign events, and there are parts of the cemetery where you can't even take pictures. He went into those sacred parts where you can't take pictures and took pictures, thumbs up, big smile in front of the graves of dead soldiers. The families of the dead soldiers are objecting. An employee of the cemetery and apparently a member of the Army, because I believe the Army owns the cemetery, tried to stop Trump and his people and got shoved out of the way and threatened, but decided not to press charges because she did not want to be harassed by Trump's MAGA, followers. But American Oversight, which is a nonpartisan, nonprofit kind of good government group, has filed a Freedom of Information Act request, and a federal judge ordered that the Arlington National Cemetery, that the Army release the records of what happened at the cemetery, and that they be released by Friday. Today is Wednesday. This is the statement from American Oversight. From their executive director, interim executive director, Choma Chukwu. With the election just 2 weeks away, the American people have a clear and compelling interest in knowing how the government responded to an alleged incident involving a major presidential candidate who has a history of politicizing the military. So the shots of Trump smiling and giving a thumbs up were later used in campaign spots, which is against the law. The employee who tried to stop the campaign workers from filming in the area was, quote, abruptly pushed aside by Trump campaign staffer. That's called assault. Army officials condemned this, and said that Trump was warned that, quote, federal laws, Army regulations, and DOD policies clearly prohibit political activities on cemetery grounds, end quote. But the Army also said we're not going to pursue this. And Trump campaign officials said that they were going to release a video proving that they didn't actually shove anybody and that they didn't take pictures where they couldn't. And now they're refusing to release the pictures. So we will know on Friday. Meanwhile, the Los Angeles Times editorial board endorsed Democratic candidates for president. They endorsed Barack Obama in 2008. They endorsed Barack Obama in 2012. In 2016. They endorsed Hillary Clinton. In 2020, they endorsed Joe Biden. But they've got a new owner, Dr. Patrick Soon-Shiong, who's a billionaire doctor who made his money in the healthcare industry. You can make $1 billion in the healthcare industry right now. It's just amazing how much money you can make, fleecing Americans. So he bought the Los Angeles Times, and executive editor Terry Tang told the editorial board earlier this month that the paper is not going to be endorsing a candidate this election cycle. The Los Angeles Times not going to endorse Kamala Harris because their billionaire owner, wants another tax cut? I don't know. It's crazy stuff. It's just crazy stuff. So, anyhow, what's on your mind? Holly in Marshall, Missouri. Hey, Holly, what's up?
Oh, I wanted to talk about the housing because we're having. Can you hear me, Tom?
Yeah, just fine, Holly.
Okay, because I've been personally fighting with the mayor since he got elected about the housing. We have people living in garages here in rural Missouri, and a hospital was recently torn down, which opened up almost 2 acres of beautiful land. It would have been perfect for multiple dwelling. I keep trying to explain to them about apartment houses that they live in every city in this country. And he said, no, and it's all private houses. And I did some research, and the developers only make money when they build a private house.
Well, they make more money that way. Yeah, they make more money that way. Well, I wish you well, Holly. I mean, again, this is you're making my point. The housing market has been badly distorted by basically the investor class, and we've got to do something about it. Holly, and good luck dealing with that there in Marshall, Missouri. Thank you so much for the call, and thank you for watching Free Speech. We'll be right back. 27 minutes past the hour.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
So what's on your mind? Stick around. I'll be picking up your calls on the other side of this break. Our book today in the Thom Hartmann Book Club is Under the Influence, Putting Peer Pressure to Work by Robert H. Frank. And I'm reading from the prologue. That we are more closely connected to one another than most of us realize is an old idea. An important variation dates from 1929 when Hungarian writer Frigyes Karinthy published a short story entitled Chains. Two of the story's main characters speculate that any two living people can be connected by a chain involving no more than 5 acquaintances. That some such chains exist is hardly surprising, since most of us can think of people in distant locations to whom we're connected through a small number of intermediaries. The man bites dog aspect of Karinthy's conjecture is that almost any two people, A and E, could be linked by a chain like A knows B, B knows C, C knows D, who knows E. One of the first systematic attempts to test this claim came in the 1960s with a series of experiments by the psychologist Stanley Milgram. In it, he sent packages containing a small booklet to 96 people chosen at random from the Omaha, Nebraska telephone directory. His cover letter asked them to try to forward the booklet to a specific residence of Boston, Massachusetts, through a chain of personal acquaintances. He told them the name and address of the Boston resident, that he worked as a stockbroker, and that the first person in their chain should be somebody they knew on a first-name basis. Milgram also advised them to choose someone they believed, presumably based on the target's location and occupation, could be socially closer to the target than they were themselves. Subsequent recipients in the chain were asked to forward the same instructions. Many of the Omaha recipients undoubtedly tossed Milgram's booklet in the trash, so it's remarkable that the Boston target received 18 of the 96 packages. The average number of links in the 18 chains was 5.9. But the now familiar expression 6 degrees of separation would not gain broad currency until many years later, when John Guare's play by that name premiered on Broadway in 1990. The concept became a meme in full when 4 Albright College students introduced 6 Degrees of Kevin Bacon in 1994, a game designed to measure the professional proximity of an actor, living or dead, to the American film star Kevin Bacon. An actor has a Bacon number of 1, for example, if he or she appeared in the same film with Bacon. Someone who appeared in a film with another actor who appeared in a film with Bacon has a Bacon number of 2, and so on. The average Bacon number is 2.95 among actors who have one. In that group, even the actor most distant from Bacon, William Rufus Shafter, has a Bacon number of only 7. Shafter, a Union Army officer during the Civil War, appeared in 2 films in 1898. For academics who study social connectedness, the 6 degrees concept gained little traction until 1998. That's when the sociologist Duncan Watts and the mathematician Steve Straga published their landmark paper, Collective Dynamics of Small World Networks in Nature. In the years since then, this paper has provided the mathematical foundation for the analytical tools that social scientists have been using with such remarkable success to study how ideas and behaviors spread through populations like infectious diseases. It has already been cited by other scholars more than 38,000 times and is one of the few papers ever published to be among the most widely cited works in multiple disciplines. In his 1976 book, The Selfish Gene, the evolutionary biologist Richard Dawkins coined the term meme, which Webster now defines as an idea, behavior, style, or usage that spreads from person to person within a culture. The meme is to cultural transmission, Dawkins argued, as the gene is to biological transmission. One of Charles Darwin's central insights was that natural selection favors genetic variations that enhance the individual organism's ability to survive and reproduce. Much of the time, the same variations also benefit larger groups, but often not. For example, an inclination to cheat when no one's looking might benefit individuals, but widespread cheating almost always makes matters worse for groups. It is the same with memes. The memes that propagate most successfully are often ones that benefit both individuals and groups. But here too, not always. As the legal scholar Jeffrey Stake has argued, ideas should not be treated as inert products, but as living things that sometimes exert some influence over their environment. Some of the ideas are more adept at surviving than others, and the ones that survive will not necessarily be good for humans. It is often hard to evaluate whether a specific behavior even qualifies as a meme, and if so, whether its consequences on balance are positive or negative. Yet sometimes the evidence is clear. We know, for example, that the strongest predictor of whether people will take up smoking is the proportion of their close friends who smoke. Smoking is thus clearly a meme. The negative health consequences of smoking are also conclusively documented, and most smokers themselves express regret over having started. By definition, then, smoking unambiguously qualifies as a socially destructive meme. On the other side of the ledger, we have compelling evidence that the adoption of photovoltaic solar panels is both socially contagious and almost uniformly positive in terms of environmental consequences. Accordingly, few would object to calling the practice a socially beneficial meme. Adam Smith, widely considered the father of economics, is often cited in defense of the claim that competitive markets produce the greatest good for the greatest number. The book is Under the Influence by Robert H. Frank.
Help support progressive radio. If you're listening to us on a commercial station, call their advertisers and let them know you're listening. If you're listening to us on Pacifica, or one of our many nonprofit stations, please support them when they do their fundraising drives. Thanks for supporting Progressive Talk Radio, and tag you're it. Recently, I did an op-ed and a little rant here about what happens when you raise the top income tax rate on morbidly rich people to 90%, and how, that helps reduce income inequality and funds the government and all kinds of good positive things. What about corporate taxes? We really need to go back to the 50% top corporate income tax rate that we had under Dwight Eisenhower, for example. The reason why is not on the assumption that we're going to collect all that money, but what it does is it causes corporations to change their behavior, to do things to try to get tax deductions so they don't have to pay that in taxes. And what are the main things they do? They develop new products. They do research and development. They become more competitive. They open up new stores. They pay their employees better. They offer better benefits. All of these things are 100% tax deductible and thus lower their corporate income taxes and help out America. You can read all about it over at HartmannReport.com.
They twist the names, they twist the truth, turning language into a tool they use. Democrat Party, they say with a sneer, mispronounce Kamala, hope and no fear. It's not just a game, it's a calculated plan to divide and deceive every woman and man. They aim for the heart, but the wounds in our trust. When words become weapons, they shatter what's just. Weaponizing words, tearing us apart. In every sentence, they poison the heart.
About 35 minutes past the hour. Picking up your calls here. Norma in Montgomery, Alabama. Hey, Norma, what's up?
Oh, everything. Earlier, someone was talking about advertising. And I have always believed that advertising is a campaign of subversion against intellectual honesty and moral integrity.
Well, if I may, very quickly, because I used to own 2 different ad agencies. Good advertising says to people who don't know that you've got a product that they can use or might be a benefit to them that product exists. I mean, there's a legitimate reason for good advertising.
Yes. Is there any, though?
Yeah, there is. There's actually a lot of good advertising out there, Norma. There really is. I mean, when your supermarket says, hey, we're running a sale on bananas, that's not there to deceive you. It's to tell you, hey, we've got bananas for 20 cents off.
Yeah, okay. Well, what I believe is that Trump is turning his name into a thing, into a product. And he talks about Trump this and Trump that, and he tries to sell Trump. Yes,
right.
It is a brand.
You're absolutely right.
And he refers to himself in the third person, Trump this and Trump that. But once advertising left something as wonderful as Doris Day and See the USA in your Chevrolet, it became what is called perception management, the science of perception management. And he has used this to teach people, that, those brown people, the black people, those yellow people are horrible, and those other people, he uses other as, to teach people this. And as long as he continues to do that, that is what the problem is with the Trump people. You can't teach them anything. They become hysterical and angry and dangerous, like him. But until, people would wake up, I wish that someone like Chris Hayes or Rachel Maddow would go back and pull up one of the early Prentice shows and then compare it to what he is saying today, so people can see that, in my personal opinion, he is suffering from some type of chronic heart failure, and he is in the early stages of Alzheimer's. And the people around him is it a crime for them to keep their mouth shut when it comes to discussing his health? Because I personally think he's off his rocker. Yeah. And I don't think I'm the only one.
No, that's a good clinical explanation,
Yeah. But until, like everybody's, I go out door knocking and talking all the time. But if we don't win this one, most people don't understand his code words, and they don't realize how dangerous he is. He wants to become Kim Jong-un and be a supreme leader. And I'm wondering if he would even allow Congress to exist. Do these Republican House people understand that he could even close the Capitol and they'd be out of a job? Particularly if he owns the entire budget for the United States. Yeah. These people don't understand because they're so deep into Trump world. I don't think that they can see further than that. But it just.
I don't disagree. I don't think there's anything that's beyond his. The wildest scenarios you can come up with are not incredible.
No department heads means no cabinet. And then if he got rid of Congress, all he would have to deal with is his own Supreme Court.
Right.
And his own loyal army that he intends to turn on everybody.
Yep.
And I don't understand why people continue. They can't seem to see this coming. And I think
there's people who see it coming and they want it. I mean, the fascists. I mean, Giorgia Meloni in Italy. Italy just elected a fascist leader. You've got. I mean, all over the world, you've got right wingers who are rising to power.
Yeah.
They elected Duterte in the Philippines. Fascism is very appealing to some people.
In my personal opinion, this is the billionaires, the trillionaires gaining control of the planet. And there are too many of us to make them happy. And so what are they going to do with us? We want things like health care and housing. And here in Alabama, we did pass a law that North Korea, China, Russia, and Iran cannot buy property in Alabama. But that does not stop someone who has, that was last year. I kept screaming about the house across the street. He says he's from Taiwan. It's been empty for almost 4 years. Wow. And, he charges $1,000 a month. And the third bedroom is actually a closet. But he's, and the house is not really livable for a family. It doesn't even have a driveway.
So it's just an investment property.
Yes, he said he wanted to buy 52 so he'd get a rent check every week. And you see, this is foreign investment like you're talking about.
Yeah.
And as long as our people are denied the things that we need, which will happen under Trump, I don't want 100 people a day beating on my door because their children are hungry.
Yeah.
And I try to explain this to people. When you get rid of the Department of Agriculture, there's no food in the schools. You get rid of the Department of Education, there may not be any schools. We have a federal law. Your children go to schools at the age of 17. Are they going to arrest people who can't pay for private school? People don't understand how, I'm scared to death, Tom, Yeah. I spent an hour yesterday just talking to about 5 people, and 2 of them understood exactly what I was saying, and they backed me up.
Yeah.
And trying to get the other 3 to understand that Social Security will be gone. Medicare, Medicaid, children's health insurance, the Affordable Care Act, education, housing, and you get rid of the FCC. How much will your phone cost you every month?
Right.
And
no,
if you get rid of,
I'm with you on all these things, Norma.
You get rid of ABC, CBS, CNN, NBC, MSNBC, and you only have Fox News.
That's what Trump would like. Actually, he doesn't want to get rid of them. He wants to sue them into bankruptcy so that he can sell them off to other right-wing billionaires who are good friends of his, who will turn them into, he'd like to see Rupert Murdoch have some competition, some real competition, not just these pathetic things like Newsmax.
Well, most of these people who support him are also big football players, and if you do not have federal money for schools, are they going to teach math and science, or are they going to teach football?
Yeah. Yeah,
and one guy looked at me really funny. He looked at me really funny. I said, you need to think about it. I said, our way of life is on the line here.
Yeah.
It used to be that you had travel lodges across the country and people would take vacations. But nobody can take a vacation today, really, not the average guy. He has to get enough gas to go to work.
Yeah, and those low-end hotels are vanishing, although Holiday Inn still has them. But, Norma, I've got to move along, but your points are very, very well made, and I truly appreciate it. Thank you so much. It's always so nice to hear from you, and you're an inspiration.
Well, I've been busy. That's why you haven't heard from me. Okay. Knocking on doors is important.
Well, thank you. Thank you, Norma. Good talking to you. Larry in Corvallis, Oregon. Hey, Larry, what's up?
Hello, Tom.
Hey.
No matter how many votes Trump gets, he cannot legally be sworn in as President of the United States of America. And if he is sworn in by a corrupt justice of the Supreme Court, we have an illegitimate government.
Are you talking about the 14th Amendment?
Yes, sir. 14th Amendment, Article 3.
The Supreme Court said it doesn't matter. You can ignore the Constitution. Or at least 6 Republicans on the Supreme Court said that. This was the Anderson decision, and I think it's one of the most corrupt decisions we've ever seen come out of a Supreme Court. It's right up there with Dred Scott.
When that happens, there will be American citizens like the Washingtons, Hamiltons, that stood up against the British Army and defeated them to reclaim our illegitimate government.
I don't think so. I think America is going to go through some stuff, to paraphrase Donald Trump. If he becomes president, we are going to slide into something very much like what Chile experienced under Pinochet.
You think the fair American people will just roll over and play dead? I don't think so. I think
I think enough will, and enough will be cowed. I mean, please, Larry, identify for me in the last 50 years or the last 100 years. We can think of at least a dozen countries that have flipped hard right. Have any of them seen a revolt by their people? Hungary didn't. Russia didn't.
Yeah, but you're talking about the
Italy
United States of America and the American people. And the liberties they're taking away from them.
I get that, and we like to think that we're exceptional, but I just don't think we are. We are exceptional in some ways. We've got massive natural resources and things like that. And,
I think we will be exceptional in this case. We will stand up just like the unarmed, fully armed, poor people in America that took over defeated the British in the 1700s.
The British were a long way away. That was a foreign government controlling us, and that's a whole different circumstance than us controlling us. Larry, I hope you're right and that I'm wrong.
And I will acknowledge that there's a possibility that you're right and I'm wrong, but I don't think so. Larry, thanks for the call.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit ThomHartmann.com for audio and video archives.
It's your media support group for We the People. Back with your calls in just a moment. And welcome back. Regina in Chicago. Hey, Regina, what's on your mind today?
Tom, can you hear me?
I can. What's up?
Oh, good. Okay, good talking to you. I've been trying to listen to you every day, and you touched something that I have been yapping about ever since 2008, back when the housing crisis happened.
Mm-hmm.
And that was around the time I refinanced my house to try to get a lower interest rate. And everything was going along just fine until, and I think they still do this, until all of a sudden, Jamie Dimon and his boys sold my mortgage to somebody else, some people I had never heard of. And since I've refinanced, my mortgage has been sold off to 2 different companies that I know nothing about.
Right. That happens a lot.
Yes. And I hope people, I mean, you're so on top of stuff, I hope people will realize that they look at us, the populace of this country, as just little peons that they can maneuver around and manipulate and lie to and, oh, well, we're going to do this. Who cares if they're in the streets? So,
yeah,
I appreciate you bringing that up because it's really important. A friend of mine is going through that exact same thing.
Yeah. They
live in an apartment building complex, and they've had 2 different new owners, and they just jumped up and returned all of their rental, gave them their money back, and then sent out notices that they haven't paid.
Right.
I mean, it's ludicrous what they are manipulating and doing to people.
Right.
And this has got to stop by us voting.
I agree. Housing should not be a commodity. Housing should be housing. It should be the essential thing that human beings need to live. And I feel the same way about education and healthcare. But go ahead.
And healthcare. That's why I was telling you about it at your book signing. That's why I jumped. And when I came back and looked at that card I was telling you about at the end of your book signing when you were here, and like I said, they had all these services, OBGYN and orthopedics and blah, 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 but nothing about psychiatric care. Yeah. Nowhere. They had other services.
Right.
I said, oh, so I guess that's where you would fall in with that. And these should be our rights. And I just wish more people would realize that, when you look at European countries, how they regulate things in other countries, there's nothing wrong with that.
Yep.
Government should have some controls in formulating the right type of society for people to live in.
Well, that's the purpose of government, for life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, the general welfare.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Keep up the good work, Tom. I'm telling you, you just don't know how you keep me, and I'm sure many of your other listeners, sane.
Well, thank you, Regina. Thank you so much. Hopefully the day will come soon when we don't have to, cling to our sanity, but America, regains its collective sanity. Regina, thank you so much for the call. Great talking to you. It's 10 minutes before the hour. Stay with us. Hey, thanks so much for sharing our program and for reaching out to our stations and sponsors and letting them know that you're listening. It really means a lot to us. From Los Angeles to Columbia, South Carolina, from Birmingham, Alabama to Baltimore, universal basic income programs are chalking up proof after proof of their viability. Basically, just giving people, low-income people, poor people, somewhere between $500 and $1,500 a month, no strings attached, is lifting people out of poverty, getting them back on track, getting them into solid middle-class jobs, helping their children tremendously. This works. Now, we don't have to do UBI in the United States. We're the only developed country in the world that doesn't have a national health care program. Health expenses are whacking a lot of low-income people. We're the only developed country in the world that doesn't have free college education. Education expenses are whacking people. There's a lot we could do. We can subsidize housing. We can subsidize food. We do that with food stamps. We could expand it. There's a lot we could do to benefit from this. There's a whole report about that over at HartmannReport.com. Check it out.
He stood on stage with a crooked smile, said I won, they're in denial. But the truth was clear for all to see, still he spun his web of conspiracy. The votes were counted, the people spoke, but he turned it all into a joke. From big to small, his lies took flight, now they're lost in the darkest night. The Trump big lie, it's tearing us apart. A house of cards, built from the start. You can't trust the word that he speaks, and his cult keeps spreading deceit. From the big lie down to the small, he's never been truthful at all.
About 52 minutes past the hour, picking up your calls here. Gene in Norco, California. Hey, Gene, what's up?
Hi, it's my turn.
Indeed.
So the thesis of my argument here is that I'm so tired of people saying that they're smarter than Vice President Harris, or that they're more well-informed than Vice President Harris. And I'd like to make a quick comment on housing and the cemetery thing. But you'd be surprised who I am. You don't lose hope on libertarians and Republicans. Housing, yeah, I bought an RV. I was fortunate enough to be able to buy an RV because I would do anything to have a roof over my head. And, you know, people run into trouble. And what I loved about what you said was, let's have a conversation about this, because I mean, we compare ourselves to Sweden, Norway, what have you. It's not really a great comparison, but it's a great idea. So corporate investors, fine, you can have 10 houses in Martha's Vineyard. It's different than having 10 houses in downtown Santa Ana in Orange County. Yep. It's like, okay, and maybe you can have an apartment building, that. But stay out of single-family homes. The American dream is a single-family home, a house, place to raise your kids, a nice middle-class job.
Yeah.
So stay out of that.
Yeah, I agree.
Like, go make your money somewhere else.
I agree. I
like the fact that you said, like, have a conversation about it. It's like a compromise. And
no, I'm not saying there should be a compromise, but you can't get to those kind of laws without having a conversation. I mean, we've got to bring this topic up. This is a topic that is not being discussed in the media. You will not see an article in today's New York Times about the housing crisis in America, and there needs to be.
And we're polarized right now. We're like this or that. Let's all agree to talk in the middle.
See, I don't think we're polarized on housing. I am guessing that if you were to say to most Trump supporters, without identifying yourself as a Democrat, if you were to simply say to most Trump supporters, I think housing should be a right, not a privilege. I think that we need to get the billionaire investors out of the housing market so that we can have decent housing. I'm guessing 95% of them would agree with you, Gene.
I think certain types of housing should be a right, not a privilege.
Yeah.
I think like a single-family home.
Yep.
That should be a right. Like the American citizen economy is an asset for the American citizen.
Yeah, shelter should be a right. The single-family home should be a privilege, but it should be one that is not compromised by Trump-supporting billionaire investors who are just looking to make another $1 trillion. I mean,
they're getting it and they're dirtying it up.
Yeah.
So I like that. Let's have a conversation about that, and I agree that we're not. The cemetery thing. If you've ever been to if you've ever been to a military funeral, it's so solemn.
Yeah.
And it's so, I don't know, just sacred. And so I listen to this show because, Tom, you show me stuff, and you'd be surprised who I am, okay? I'm gonna go ahead and pull off the mask. Trump is my hero, okay? But so there's hope. There's hope for us, okay? Kamala Harris is not dumb. I'm tired of hearing that. Kamala Harris is not less informed. I am a software engineer. I am not as smart as Kamala Harris or Vice President Harris. Kamala, whatever. I don't know how to say it.
Yeah.
Vice President Harris. I don't. You wouldn't want me trying to run the country. I'm good at talking to computers.
Especially not if Trump is your hero, Jim. Forgive me, but...
And so it's like there's hope out there. Like, we're not all terrible.
I get it.
So anyways, if that's right about the cemetery thing, we need to look at that. Not necessarily... So whoever gets... I'm not going to go into it. There's a lot of reasons why I wouldn't want Kamala to get voted in, but I'm going to trust her. I'm going to trust her intelligence. I'm going to trust her information, and everybody else out there needs to accept it.
Good on you, Gene. Good on you. Gene, I'm sorry I'm out of time, but thank you for a heartfelt call, and I appreciate your sentiments. We'll be back on the other side of this break. The latest Fox News Live from Sean Hannity. It's mind-boggling.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann.
We say fight back!
In addition to bringing you the Thom Hartmann program here on Free Speech TV and Video Media Online, we also have a whole set of ways you can interact with us and tools you can use to spread the word about the importance of democracy and the threats to it in our republic. First, there's your daily homework. Sue Nethercutt puts together a daily email newsletter that has a link to every story I discuss on the air, so you can find my sources and you can share them with your friends. It's free and you can sign up at ThomHartmann.com. Second, I publish my daily take every day over at the HartmannReport.com website. That's also free if you want the daily 5 days a week rant in your inbox. No ads either. Third, we have the podcasts. There's the free 1-hour version of our daily show that's advertising supported. You can find that wherever you get your podcasts normally. And then there's also the podcast of the entire 3-hour show with no advertisements, and that's available by subscription over at ThomHartmann.com. So check them all out at ThomHartmann.com and HartmannReport.com.
For the Thom Hartmann University Book Club today, we're reading Locked Down, Locked Out, Why Prison Doesn't Work and How We Can Do Better by Maya Chenwar, who is, or was, I believe she still is, the publisher, or the editor, rather, over at truthout.org. This is from the introduction, the very beginning of the book. She uses a word I can't say on the air. I'll replace it with the word damn. Damn, 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 damn. I'm crying with my mother over the phone. It's late evening, December 25th, 2012, and Kayla, my only sister and best friend, has been arrested for the 7th time in the past 6 years. She's in jail again, and this time we're sort of hoping she'll stay there. If she asks, I tell Mom, I'm not bailing her out. Well, you know, we're not, Mom says, her voice low and far away, a weary echo of words uttered in months and years past. If she's in there, at least she'll be safe. Jail, we agree, may be the only place that can save Kayla's life, staving off her burning dependency on heroin. Neither of us acknowledges that regardless of whether Kayla stays clean while incarcerated, sooner or later she'll be getting out. Do we know what she's in for, I asked Mom. Does it matter? I think of Kayla cuffed and listless, being dragged through the doors of the Cook County Jail, catching the eyes of women she's known before in court, on the street, in juvenile detention, in jail, in prison. I wonder whether a part of her is relieved to be back. Later, when I pick up the phone and hear a robotic voice announce, "You have a collect call from the Cook County Jail, press 5 to take the call," I press the hang-up button and get into bed. My attitude toward Kayla's incarceration was born out of desperation. She'd overdosed 3 times within 2 months, passing out on the street, awakening in abandoned buildings or crowded hospitals, her pulse barely ticking. Yet my wish chafed against not only my love for her, but also my politics, my ideals, my sense of justice and truth. After all, I run a social justice-based news organization and have denounced the colossus that is the prison industrial complex for as long as I can remember. For nearly a decade, I've corresponded with a number of people in prison as both interviewees and pen pals, and I've learned much from them about the violence and hopelessness of our system. My understandings of the power structures that create prisons have been guided by the work of people like activist and scholar Angela Davis, a staunch prison abolitionist. How could I reconcile my wholehearted opposition to the prison industrial complex with a desire to see my own sister locked up? When I look back on that time, I can only comprehend it by acknowledging the insidious, persistent role that prison occupied in my mind. It was closely connected to the role it occupies in larger society. Incarceration serves as the default answer to many of the worst social problems plaguing this country. Not because it solves them, but because it buries them. By isolating and disappearing millions of Americans, more than 2.3 million right now, making us the most incarcerated country on the planet, prison conveniently disappears deeply rooted issues that society, or rather those with power in society, would rather not attend to. Prison, writes Angela Davis, performs a feat of magic. As massive numbers of homeless, hungry, unemployed, drug-addicted, illiterate, and mentally ill people vanish behind its walls, the social problems of extreme poverty, homelessness, hunger, unemployment, drug addiction, illiteracy, and mental illness become more ignorable, too. But, as Davis notes, prisons do not disappear problems, they disappear human beings. And the caging and erasure of those human beings, mostly people of color and poor people, perpetuates a cycle in which large groups of people are cut off from mainstream society and denied the freedoms, opportunities, civil dignity, and basic needs that allow them a good life. In many jails and prisons, incarcerated people are tossed into a dank, dungeon-like solitary confinement cell when they are determined to have misbehaved. It's dubbed the hole. Isolated and dark, it shuts out almost all communication with fellow prisoners in the outside. Guards control the terms of confinement and the channels, if any, by which words can travel in and out. The whole presents a stark symbol of the institution of prison in its entirety, which functions on the tenets of disappearance, isolationism, and disposability. The solution to our social problems, the mechanism that's supposed to keep things together, amounts to destruction. The disposal of vast numbers of human beings, the breaking down of families, and the shattering of communities. Prison is tearing society apart. This country's most marginalized communities bear the overwhelming brunt of that devastation, but ultimately we are all caught up in the destruction as the politics of isolation ruptures the human bonds that could otherwise hold together a safer, healthier, and more just society. The behemoth that encompasses the prison is called by many names. The most meaningful ones, I think, are those that convey the pervasiveness of its power, the way it infects the world outside as well as the people within. Scholar and activist Beth Ritchie uses the term prison nation, describing it as, quote, a broad notion of using the arm of the law to control people, especially people who are disadvantaged and come from disadvantaged communities, end quote. That control can take the form of prisons, jails, surveillance, policing, detention, probation, harsh restrictions on child guardianship, the militarization of schools, and other strategies of isolation and disposal, particularly deployed against poor communities of color, especially black communities. Others have used prison nation simply to demonstrate the system's vastness, how it infiltrates our culture and fuels our national politics, often in invisible ways. Prison industrial complex, PIC, is another key term. Rachel Herzing of the prison abolitionist group Critical Resistance defines it. And then she goes on through this. It's an extraordinary book, Locked Down, Locked Out by Maya Shen.
is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Welcome to hour 3 of our program, and Fox Noise and Sean Hannity are at it again. My colleague from the talk radio business, this is just mind-boggling. Monday night, Hannity on his program looked straight into the camera and said, Harris can't run on whether or not this country is better off than we were 4 years ago, because for a very simple reason, by every measure, we are far worse off. Right. Now, this is the same guy who, by the way, when he was sued, admitted under oath in court that he was lying to his viewers for 2 years about Dominion voting machines and Trump having lost the election. That he lied for 2 years, and that he was talking to his colleagues, Laura Ingraham and others within Fox so-called news, pointing out the fact that they were all lying to their viewers for 2 years. And Fox ended up paying $787 million in fines for those lies. Now, that was just one little set of lies. Media Matters for America, MediaMatters.org, pretty much documents Fox lies every single day. But this one is mind-boggling. Here's Sean Hannity looking right into the camera and telling his viewers, you are worse off today than you were 4 years ago. So, I mean, this was on Monday. This is October 21st. So let's step into the Wayback Machine and go back exactly 4 years and, see what was going on. Oliver Willis, by the way, writing about this over at Daily Kos. So on that day, on Monday of this week, 4 years ago, I don't know if it was a Monday, but the U.S. death toll from COVID was 213,964, and that day, 1,051 people died from COVID. That one day. There was no cure. The Trump administration's COVID response was completely chaotic. And you would think that Hannity would remember this, because he was out there pitching ivermectin and hydrochloroquine. Now, Biden and Harris took this virus seriously, unlike Trump and Hannity. And in fact, I would argue that Hannity and Fox are responsible. They've got an enormous amount of blood on their hands. They're responsible for thousands, if not hundreds of thousands, of dead Americans because of the way they scammed Americans around the coronavirus epidemic, the pandemic. But anyhow, during the monologue, Hannity said that crime has gone up during Biden's regime. In reality, murders are down 30%. Excuse me, murders had increased nearly 30% during the last 2 years of the Trump administration, between 2019 and 2020. As did violent crime. It went up during the last 2 years of the Trump administration. Now, granted, you can probably attribute some of that to the pandemic. But under Biden and Harris, those crime rates are falling precipitously. According to the FBI, violent crime is at the lowest level since 1969. Let that sink in. The lowest level of violent crime across the United States since 1969. It hit a peak in 1991, by the way. So Hannity, again, just lying to his audience. Joblessness. He was talking about how, the economy sucks. Well, no, I'm sorry. The unemployment rate in October, on that day in October 2020, was 6.8%. Under Trump, it had hit a peak of 14.8%. Just like violent crime, it had peaked under Trump. And now violent crime is, again, down to where it was in 1969. Or joblessness, excuse me, I'm talking about joblessness. It had reached a peak of 14.8%. The current unemployment rate is 4.1%. And Joe Biden has added 15 million jobs. That's 14 million jobs more than all the jobs created during the Reagan administration, the George Herbert Walker Bush administration, the George W. Bush administration, and the Donald Trump administration combined. The last 4 Republican administrations combined created 1 million new jobs. The last 4 Democratic administrations combined have created 50 million new jobs, 15 million of them on Joe Biden's watch, the highest number of new jobs created in 4 years of any president in the history of America. On October 22nd, 2020, 4 years ago, the Dow Jones Industrial Average topped out, closed at 28,300. As Hannity was speaking, or earlier in the day before the Dow closed, it closed at 42,931. That's a 51% increase from the low during Donald Trump's presidency. If you had bought stock when Trump crashed the market, you would have seen your money double in the last 4 years. Double. 51.6%. Just buy the Dow. You don't even have to buy individual stocks. You can just buy an index fund, the Dow. And yet Sean Hannity is going on TV looking right to his viewers and saying, oh, no, you're worse off today than you were 4 years ago. By any metric, yeah. This is a pattern of behavior over at Fox News. As I pointed out, Hannity, admitted in court when he was finally deposed, when he had to speak under oath, that he had been lying to his viewers for 2 years. He pushes conspiracy theories. He echoes Trump's lies. I just, as a person in the media, I've been doing this show 21 years. I've been, about the same, maybe longer, I'm not sure, as Sean Hannity. We've both been in this business for a lot of years, and, we've both gone to the talkers' conventions in New York, and we have friends in common, people we know in common. And I just think it's so sad that a colleague of mine is so committed to lying to his viewers and his listeners. Speaking of lying, Donald Trump just told a whopper. This was last night. He was talking about his daughter Tiffany. The one that he had tried to talk Marla Maples into aborting, but Marla Maples wouldn't go along with it because, whatever. My personal theory is that she knew that, hey, having the baby of a billionaire is not a bad thing, shall we say. And Tiffany seems like a sweet kid. She graduated from law school. She's got a law degree. She graduated in 2020. But Trump can't help himself. He has to lie whenever he says pretty much anything, and or at least exaggerate. This is just like, he's been a salesman his whole life. And there are those of us who think that sales is when you honestly tell people that your product will meet their needs. But then, of course, as Norma pointed out, there's a whole huge spectrum of people who think that advertising and sales is really about hustling people, and that's Trump. So what does he say? He says, she was a great student. She went to a fantastic law school, graduated #1 in her class. So the news media called up Georgetown University Law School and said, did Tiffany Trump graduate #1 in her class? And they said, no, she's not even on the honors list. And by the way, we don't rank our students. There is no #1 in the class. None. There are honors students and not honors students, and she's a not honors student, but hey, she graduated, she got a law degree. We don't know if she passed the bar. We don't know if she got a job. She's entitled to her private life. God bless her. But her dad's out there lying about her. I just can't imagine. 21 years I've been doing this show, and I've always worked to make sure that everything I say I can back up 100%. And on the rare occasions when I get something wrong, invariably somebody will call up and set me right. And I appreciate that. But can you imagine lying for a living?
This This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
I get it. Hannity's a multimillionaire now as a result of those lies. It's very profitable to lie for a living in some parts of this country. I can't imagine it. And welcome back. Sean just handed me the one sheet from October 23rd, 2020, 4 years ago. This was the rundown for our program. And former Congressman Brian Baird, who was talking about Trump was a psychopath. Brian Baird was a psychologist. Ro Khanna was on the program. And inside the Republican plot for permanent minority rule, how the GOP keeps cheating its way into power. Fascinating. How about that? Thank you, Sean. All right, let's pick up some phone calls here. Who's been on hold the longest? There we go. Linda in Portland. Hey, Linda, what's on your mind today?
Wonderful Wednesday, Tom, and all of your fabulous listeners. What's on my mind today is that we take a moment of pause and pay a little bit closer attention to the stunt pulled at the cemetery.
Mm-hmm. Hopefully it'll be top of the news on Friday when the report comes out.
I'm concerned there's something far more sinister and not like conspiracy. It's kind of like the Bible at the church. Mm-hmm. The Black Lives Matter when right, but this seems like coming up onto the Day of the Dead and his connection with the indigenous people, saying that how a lot of indigenous people follow him, a lot of the Hispanic community follow him and believe what he has to offer. However, coming up on the Day of the Dead and those traditions, I'm wondering if he's trying to pose as someone that's willing to go into these cemeteries and talk to our spiritual ancestors and call them forth, like saying, I need generals like that other twit, Hitler.
So are you suggesting, Linda, that you think that Donald Trump went to that cemetery as part of some satanic ritual?
Absolutely. And furthermore, to show the peoples that participate in the Day of the Dead spiritual life and understand what that is and the communication between our ancestors, and for him to be in a space where it's super duper holy ground. Mm-hmm. To go in there with all of the propaganda around this whole thing about the devil coming back and all these other things that have been happening around in the world that we know of, and for him to do this particular stunt now just leads for me to pause. What is he really trying to do? What are the real questions? It's not about the propaganda, because that guy doesn't do anything that isn't for somebody else's desire. He doesn't do anything of his own volition. He wouldn't know how.
Trump? No, I think he does a lot of his own volition. He does things for himself.
I don't know that he does that, but that's something we could discuss over coffee, I suppose.
Yeah. But, the idea that Donald Trump went into that cemetery, basically, it was also Robert E. Lee's old plantation. It's probably got a pretty weird vibe to begin with, but that he would go into that cemetery to try to invoke, dead spirits. Entrance to
the spiritual world in a form that's known by others that practice that, to show them, to get their vote.
I can't debunk or dispute that, Linda. It's who knows, Linda. Thank you. You win the Halloween prize for this week for sure. Thank you very much. It's 20 minutes past the hour. Actually, Halloween's next week, isn't it? We'll be right back. Stay tuned. Missed my opening rant today? It's usually published over at HartmannReport.com, where you can read it and share it with your friends for free. Check it out, HartmannReport.com. I remember my dad's Republican Party, the Republican Party of Dwight Eisenhower. Dwight Eisenhower, who ran on advocacy for democracy around the world, for a clean environment, for honest wages, for unions, for building infrastructure, for government balanced spending, for peace in the world. This is from his 1956 campaign.
Eisenhower knows how to deal with the Russians. He has met Europe's leaders, has got them working with us. Elect the number one man for the number one job of our time. November 4th, vote for peace. Vote for Eisenhower. A paid bill.
Right. Vote for peace. That was it. And now the Republicans are the party of, military boondoggles and corruption and hate and anti-union and everything, the opposite of everything Eisenhower stood for. Will the Republican Party survive this? What are they going to come back as? There's a whole op-ed about this titled Goodbye Liz Cheney over at HartmannReport.com. Check it out.
The sun is shining bright, a brand new day in sight. A chance to make a difference, to shine a little light with every
It's 21 minutes past the hour, picking up your calls here. David in St. Paul, Minnesota. Hey, David, what's on your mind today?
Yeah, hey, Tom, thanks for taking my call. I want to get back, talk about the billionaires and Elon Musk and the fact that how many years did we hear about George Soros-sponsored prosecutors and George Soros-sponsored politicians are going to destroy this company, not this country. Now you have Elon Musk literally paying people, whether it's illegal or legal for his campaign stunts in this lottery or whatever they're doing. How do the Democrats message against that without using George Soros? I'm not demonizing George Soros, but how do you,
I think you point out that it's a crime, and that even accepting the money from Elon Musk is a crime. That would be a starting point.
Yeah, it'd be a great point to talk about money in politics right now as well, and say Elon Musk, whether it's Elon Musk or George Soros, whoever, I don't care Peter Thiel or any of these billionaires. How do you, let's get it out of here.
Yeah, so we've got a billionaire infestation problem right here in America. You're absolutely right.
And Tom, you talked about the governors last week. I think governors trying to Trump-proof the government in case, or their states, and how do we Elon Musk proof things? Right now he's got his hands into everything in the federal government. He's got Starlink, he's got his internet access, he's got his satellites, he's the space program. How does this guy get this much power in the government? And that's what's scary to me too. So thank you. I just wanted your input on that. How do we Elon-proof our government?
I think we should outlaw billionaires, but I realize my position is a minority position, even with Democrats. So I used to have a website, No Billionaires. I've made that argument before. That once you've hit $1 billion, that's $1,000 million. That's $1 million 1,000 times. You can't spend that much money in your entire life. No way. Maybe if you, I suppose it's possible, but not in any reasonable way, shall we say? It's just obscene. These levels of wealth. Elvis in Houston, Texas. Hey, Elvis, what's on your mind today? Thanks for listening.
Hey, how you doing, Tom?
Good. What's up?
Yeah, how you doing, Tom? Hey, the comment I had was one of the things that I remember hearing from FDR in one of the shows that I saw was he talked about economic royalists. Those were the people who were opposing his policies during the Great Depression.
Correct.
I think one of the things I've noticed is that when we talk about taxes and inheritance taxes and progressive income tax, it's always discussed from an economic perspective. Mm-hmm. But I remember when I was in the late 70s and early 80s studying economics at university in England, it was always discussed from an equity perspective. If you allow a small group to have massive wealth uncontrolled, you will have a very unstable society. The function of the progressive income tax and inheritance tax is to keep that stability, that social stability and fairness in your society. And I think we're seeing the consequences of ignoring that happening today. And just one other quick thing. One of the things that Trump keeps talking about going back to, the 1790s, 1789, and the 1890s is because at that time we did not have a federal income tax. Right. And I think one of the agendas from the Heritage Foundation is to get rid of the income tax. Can you imagine a society of the U.S. today without any taxation on the mega wealthy?
Right. And I agree with you that is
a stable society.
Yeah, I agree with you, Elvis, that's right at the top of their list. And it's important to remember that taxation has two purposes. And, one is, of course, to raise revenue for the government. That's the one that everybody understands. But the second is to actually change behavior. The reason that, for example, we give companies the ability to deduct research and development costs from their taxes, to reduce their taxes, is because we want them to do more research and development. The reason why we give people an income tax deduction for their mortgage is because we think that home ownership is a net positive good. It's how you build a middle class. It's how the middle class, 61% of the wealth of the American middle class is in their homes right now.
Yeah, I'll throw another one at you. And when I talk about stability, for example, again, I'll speak of myself. When I was growing up in England, I went to one of the top universities in the country, and my parents did not have to pay for it. The government paid for it.
Exactly.
And that has benefited me and my family, because now my kids have all gone to university here in the U.S., of course, but I'm in a position where I can pay for it.
Absolutely. And had you stayed in the U.K., it would have benefited your government as well, your country and your government. Elvis, thank you for the call. We'll be back on the other side of this break with more of your calls. What's on your mind today? Stick around. We'll be right back.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
It's the place where despair is not an option. I'll be right back with your calls.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
We're reading today from How to Survive a Pandemic by Michael Greger, MD. Thom Hartmann Book Club is Richard Wolff's Understanding Socialism. This is from the introduction. Socialism is a kind of yearning for a better life than what capitalism permits for most people. Socialist yearnings are as old as capitalism itself because they are its products. Where and when capitalism's problems and failings have accumulated criticism and critics, socialist voices have arisen. And so it is again now. Any serious discussion of socialism must begin by acknowledging socialism's rich diversity. Whatever particular aspect of socialism we choose to analyze, they need to be located within socialism's complexity. That avoids presenting one's own interpretation as if it were the entirety of socialism. In this book, I focus on the economic aspects of socialism, how it differs from capitalism in broad outlines. I'm more interested in socialist critiques of capitalism and their implications about socialist alternatives than in the particulars of the few early experiments in erecting socialist systems, USSR, People's Republic of China, and so on, that history so far offers. Finally, my own education and work constrain me to concentrate on Western Europe and North America. Some important aspects of socialism are thus not covered or discussed here. Yearnings for better lives, such as socialism proposes, are not new. In slave societies, the slaves hoped and dreamed of lives less hard and less out of their own control. Their yearning aimed to obtain freedom. They sought social change that would preclude any one person being the property of another. In feudal societies, the serfs, free in the sense that no one owned them, yearned for better lives too. Their subordination to lords included heavy labor and other burdens that they wanted lifted. They hoped and dreamed of a society in which they would not be bound to the land, the lord of that land, and the feudal dues of labor and subservience. The serfs mobilized in the 1789 French Revolution to demand liberty, equality, and brotherhood. In effect, the serfs had expanded on what the slaves had called freedom. In the American Revolution against British King George III, the revolutionaries were neither slaves nor serfs. They were mostly self-employed farmers, craftspeople, and merchants subject to a foreign feudal kingdom. They wanted liberty as individuals to pursue their dreams without hindrance from feudalism or monarchism, whether foreign or domestic. They added democracy to the goals advanced by the slaves and serfs before them. The different systems of slavery, feudalism, and small-scale self-employment produced masses of people yearning for better lives. Eventually, each of those systems provoked revolutions. Many people then sought to break away from and go beyond those systems. The French and American revolutions marked key moments in the social transformations of major pre-capitalist systems into capitalist ones. By capitalist system, we mean that particular organization of production in which the basic human relation is employer-employee instead of master-slave, lord-serf, or individual self-employment. The revolutionaries who wanted and built capitalism hoped and believed the transition to employer-employee relations of production would bring with them the liberty, equality, brotherhood, and democracy they had yearned for. The revolution's leaders promised to themselves and to the people they led that those goals would be achieved. But the transition to capitalist employer-employee relations that increasingly replaced the previous slave, feudal, and self-employment relations of production had unintended consequences. Capitalism soon proved to be different from what its revolutionaries had hoped. While it enabled some people to be more free and more independent than slaves, serf, or self-employed subjects of monarchies had been, it also seriously limited freedom, independence, and democracy for many. Capitalism betrayed many of the promises made by its advocates. It produced and reproduced great inequalities of income and wealth. Poverty proved to be as endemic as capitalism seemed equally adept at producing and reproducing both wealth and poverty. The capitalist rich used their wealth to shape and control politics and culture. Democratic forms hid very undemocratic content. The cyclical instability attending capitalism constantly threatened and hurt large numbers of people, and so on. Growing numbers of employees within capitalism began to yearn for better lives. They defined those yearnings first in the familiar terms of the earlier French and American revolutions: equality, fraternity, liberty, and democracy. They criticized a capitalism that failed to deliver those to most people and demanded social changes to achieve them. Many people still continue to want a better, softer, friendlier capitalism, where government regulates and intervenes to achieve more of what the French and American revolutionaries had yearned for and promised. They are also often self-defined as socialists. However, capitalism's development provoked another, different perspective that also called itself socialism. In that view, capitalism had not broken from slavery, feudalism, and monarchy nearly as much as its advocates had imagined. Slavery had master slaves, feudalism had lord serfs, and monarchy had king subjects as their key sources of their inequalities, lack of freedom, oppressions, and conflicts. The employer-employee relation of production and capitalism generated parallel problems. Capitalism installed monarchies inside individual workplaces, even as monarchies outside workplaces were rejected. Kings mostly disappeared, but inside workplaces, the owners or their designated boards of directors assumed king-like powers. The book Understanding Socialism by Richard Wolff. Share the Thom Hartmann program with your friends. Our podcast, The Hartmann Report, is absolutely free and available wherever fine podcasts are available. And the entire 3-hour podcast is available over at thomhartmann.com. So all over the United States, Republican-controlled states have been purging their voter lists, particularly of people who live in big cities, more likely to be Democratic voters. It's become kind of an art form for Republicans. When they were doing it in Ohio some years ago, back in 2012, I believe, there was a lawsuit that took it all the way to the Supreme Court, and the Republicans on the Supreme Court said, that's fine, they can purge voters in the big cities, no problem. So the whole purge. So now Texas has come up with a whole new scam. They've got this thing called the suspend list. And the suspend list, if you're on the suspend list, when you show up, you're given a provisional ballot. Provisional ballots are basically placebo ballots. More often than not, they don't get counted. And so this is the new little scheme. There's a whole article about it, Democracy Undone, the Texas placebo ballot plot, over at HartmannReport.com. Check it out.
There's a
poison in the airways, spreading lies for prophecy. They twist the truth and break us with every claim they fake. Brett Baer smiled and lied while millions watched him on the screen. A story told distorted to serve a darker scheme. They feed the hate, they sell the fear, corrupting minds year after year. The soil of truth is burning dry while greed and power fuel the lie. It's the greatest threat to democracy, a cancer growing silently. When truth is lost, what's left to see? The greatest threat to you and me. They sell the headlines, chase the gold, while stories left untold unfold.
Welcome back, 36 minutes past the hour, and picking up your calls here. Gary in Garfield, New Jersey. Hey, Gary, what's up? Gary, listening on Sirius XM? We got Gary potted up and everything? Well, Gary was on hold for quite a while, so I'm going to put him on hold rather than dump him. And let's go to Luigi, and he's on line 1, by the way, Mateo, if you want to check it out. Luigi in Pensacola, Florida. Hey, Luigi, what's up?
First of all, I'd like to make a suggestion to you, because I do read Daily Kos and Raw Stories and websites like that, and constantly in the comment section, I read about some people go spot on this and spot on that. I think you need to patent that, Tom. And Thom Hartmann, spot on.
I didn't, it's not original to me, Luigi. It's just kind of an anacronism. It's from the 50s,
But I read it all the time, so I just thought I'd offer that as a suggestion.
Cool. Okay.
On the conversation you had yesterday with a gentleman from Texas about Americans filling the jobs of the migrants if they're sent away or whatever, I have a little disagreement and maybe a proposition to see what you feel. But I know, like last year here in Florida, down in the Okeechobee, Waxahachie area, all the farms around there, and the Lake Okeechobee, Indian Homestead, when the state legislature passed legislation attacking all these migrants and scaring them the heck out of Florida, that they were all leaving. And what happened was 2 of these state legislatures actually went into the community and talked these people into please staying. One of them asked, well, you're the ones that voted to get rid of us. And one of them actually said this to those people, that, we tried to scare you. Well, it worked, they said. And they stayed because they got raises and so forth. And they also were promised other things they really were looking for, okay?
That's interesting.
Now, my point is, yes, and that's a fact. My point is also this. In Alabama about 6 years ago, they did the same sort of thing, not as big of an impact on them immigrants, but a lot of them left, and they kept trying to hire people up to $15 and $17 an hour. And you can look this up. Actually, people did not want those jobs. They kept now, there are a couple, maybe a few dozen, that did take it for a while, but they couldn't do the work that the migrants were doing. The heat got to them and all, and everything like that. And so they wouldn't even take the jobs at that much money. My point is, perhaps you are correct in one instance, and this is not a conspiracy, just a thought that I've been having, watching where these child labor laws have been loosened up. And also the same states like Texas and Florida that refuse to expand Medicaid. They're putting these people in a position that they go into such debt that you've talked about it many a times, and they have to take the jobs they can get. Right. So if the migrants are gone, perhaps maybe these people will be taking those jobs. Otherwise, Tom, I don't think people are going to be working in those fields. That's just my opinion. I'd like your opinion on that.
Well, I think you make a bunch of good points there, Luigi, and particularly that part of the Republican strategy is keep the minimum wage at $7.25 an hour, which is, the equivalent of a little over $4 an hour back when it was, set almost 2 decades ago, and deny people health care. So if they want to get, any kind of health care at all, they're going to have to pay for it themselves. So you're just keeping them in perpetual debt so that they are basically forced to work crap jobs. When I was a teenager, I picked apples for a couple of weeks one summer, thinking that I would, make some money. That's damn hard work. I got to tell you, it's damn hard work. And and that was picking apples is probably a hell of a lot easier than picking strawberries or lettuce. At least I wasn't bending over; I was on a ladder. But trying to fill a lug of apple. I forget what a lug was, but it was a certain number of bushels or percent or whatever. So I think you're right, Luigi. I think you're right. Yeah, I think you made some great points. Thank you very much, Gary in Garfield, New Jersey. Hey, Gary, what's up?
Hey, Tom, how are you doing today?
Good.
Very interesting show. Divergent. I was going to talk about the housing instance because I'm a landlord, and I find it despicable that a lot of these corporations are buying up these single-family homes and basically knocking a lot of people out of the housing market, and they are having to stay into rental units for ad infinitum. So I'm definitely in agreement with you on that shelter should be a right, just like medicine and health care and education.
Yeah, or at least protected.
Yes, right, exactly. And like I said, it just, I see this. I've been a landlord for 40 years. I've seen it all my life, and it's really disheartening to see and hear some of the stories that I've heard. And I really think the government should get much more involved in this.
Well, you have a unique perspective here, Gary, in that you are a landlord. What suggestions do you have for fixing or reforming the system? What would you do if you could wave a magic wand?
First of all, I wouldn't allow corporations to buy more than like 3 houses, like you said, because that's really taking people out of the middle class or trying to get into the middle class.
Right.
And these investors aren't buying houses like the other callers in Martha's Vineyard or in some area where it's very very expensive to live. They're buying middle class houses, turning them into rental units, and getting prime rental prices for them, and really not really fixing them up. I've heard a few things from a few other landlords that I know about this, so I know it's kind of like a shell game.
Yeah,
but that's my point on that. So
yeah, well, point well made. Point well made, Gary.
Yeah.
Thanks a lot for weighing in. I appreciate it. Nice to hear from the perspective of somebody who actually owns property that you rent out. Thank you. Jeff in Avon Park, Florida. Hey, Jeff, what's up?
Hey, Tom. How you doing?
Good. What's on your mind?
I spoke to you once before about the October Surprise book, and this kind of fast forward ties in a little bit. As an independent journalist, I kind of stumbled into something that boggles my mind, and that is what is the possible reasoning for the nastiest, most corrupt neocon of the last 40 years, Dick Cheney, to not endorse the Republican GOP?
What it tells you is that Dick Cheney realizes that Donald Trump is a singular, unique threat to the American Republic. That I mean, all you have to do is look at history. Look at the wealthy people who supported Adolf Hitler. Most of them, many of them anyway, had to flee the country. It's dictatorships don't generally work out well for everybody unless you're willing to kiss the dictator's butt right up to the very end. And what happened to the people who did that, like Reichsmüller Bishop, Hitler created an official Nazi church, and he put this guy, his name was Müller. He was the Reichsbishop Müller, put him in charge of the church. What did Müller do when the war ended? He committed suicide. A lot of the industrialists were prosecuted after the end of the war. So, Dick Cheney is looking at that, going, I don't want to be this. I don't want to be the CEO of Halliburton in a Trump administration. I get it.
It just confuses me because obviously the corruption doesn't bother him. He crafted 2 illegal wars.
No, I know. Dick Cheney is Dick Cheney is one of the most corrupt vice presidents we've ever had. I mean, and he became vice president in order to rescue his own company that was on the verge of bankruptcy. Halliburton was, he had made this bet when he bought Dresser Industries that the asbestos lawsuits were going to fail, and instead they succeeded. And suddenly, Dresser Industries was such a what's the bird? The albatross around the neck of Halliburton, that it was threatening to bankrupt the entire company. And so, once Cheney became vice president, he started shoveling no-bid contracts, billion-dollar no-bid contracts at Halliburton, which not only rescued the company, but rescued the hundreds of thousands of shares in the company that Dick Cheney had gotten as compensation for being its CEO, which turned Dick Cheney into a probably 100 multi-millionaire. And, so, I get that. Dick Cheney's not a good guy. But there are apparently limits even for people like Dick Cheney, Jeff. I think that's the lesson we have to take from this, and that should be pretty damn shocking, actually. Jeff, thanks for the call. 45 minutes past the hour. We'll be back with more of your calls in just a moment. It's the Thom Hartmann program, Talk Media for the sane among us. Stick around. We'll be right back.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit Hartmann.com for audio and video archives.
Speaking the truth, Dick Cheney and George W. Bush would really rather you didn't know all about it. I'll be right back with your calls. And welcome back, Mark in Los Angeles. Hey, Mark, thanks for watching Free Speech TV. What's on your mind today?
Hey, Tom. I want to give you my scenario post-election. The Democrats win the House and the Senate, and Kamala becomes president. And as soon as she is certified, President Joe Biden declares the Supreme Court null and void because of its corruption, and appoints the Attorney General to find the special prosecutor to investigate the Supreme Court.
Right.
I think they would be willing to nullify the election.
Oh, I think it's entirely possible. They did it in 2000. If the recount in Florida had been allowed to continue, they would have discovered that Katherine Harris had set aside over 45,000 votes for Al Gore, and said that these were spoiled votes because, in addition to pushing the whole button, the hole for Al Gore, the people also wrote Al Gore on the ballot. The intent of their vote was unambiguous, and the Supreme Court had previously ruled that intent of the voter is the gold standard for counting votes. So the recount would have showed that George W. Bush lost Florida by over 45,000 votes. But and that's why the Supreme Court had to stop that Florida recount. They knew that, and there's no doubt in my mind that if they can find a reason to set aside the election this time, the 6 Republicans on the Supreme Court will do it again. And there's no doubt in my mind that the Republican lawyers are doing everything they can to set up that very scenario. But the President Biden does not have the authority to nullify the Supreme Court, and he wouldn't. I mean, he's too much of an institutionalist to even think like that. That is kind of Hitler talk,
Yeah, but did what's his name, the leader of the Senate?
Schumer?
I can't remember. I'm sorry, no, not Schumer, the Republican.
Yeah, Mitch McConnell.
Mitch McConnell, yes. Did he have any hesitation about holding off a year?
No, but he had the legal right to do that. He had the legal authority to do that. Joe Biden does not have the legal authority to rule the Supreme Court. What he can do, and 2 presidents have done before him, Andrew Jackson and Abraham Lincoln, is he can ignore the Supreme Court. With Andrew Jackson, the President Andrew Jackson ignored 2 Supreme Court rulings. The first was the Trail of Tears. They declared that unconstitutional and said he couldn't do it, and he did it anyway. And the second was the Second National Bank of America. They declared it constitutional, and he shut it down anyway, saying that he thought it was unconstitutional. And then with Abraham Lincoln, it was Dred Scott, which happened before the Lincoln presidency. Dred Scott was in 1856. Lincoln came into office in March of 1861. But, one of the first things Lincoln did was said, basically that was terrible for poor Mr. Scott, but I'm not going to enforce that in the northern states. And, there were some northern states that were quite ready to enforce Dred Scott. So, and Lincoln put an end to that. So there is a precedent for presidents ignoring Supreme Court rulings. But, I'm skeptical that Joe Biden ever would. Mark, thank you for the call. Although it would be interesting if the Supreme Court were to rule like they did in 2000 and hand the election to, in this case, Donald Trump, what Biden might do. I mean, it's a very good question. Clinton didn't have the balls to stand up to them, frankly. Hey, thanks so much for sharing our program and for reaching out to our stations and sponsors and letting them know that you're listening. It really means a lot to us. So back in 1933, when Franklin Roosevelt became president, we were in the depths of the Great Depression. He raised the top income tax rate on billionaires from 25% to 90%. The ultra-rich were screaming, and here's what he had to say.
A number of my friends who belong in the very high upper bracket have suggested to me on several occasions of late that if I am re-elected president, they will have to move to some other nation because of high taxes here. Now, I will miss them very much.
He just took it right to them, right? Now, what came out of that was the world's largest and fastest growing and first major middle class. We can do this again. We just have to raise taxes on rich people. It's pretty straightforward. There's a whole article about it over at HartmannReport.com. Check it out.
Every day's an opportunity to do something good.
It is 51 minutes past the hour. Picking up your calls here. Jules in St. Louis, Missouri. Hey, Jules, what's on your mind today?
Hi there. Tom, you read from a book that mentions the Dum Diversas by Pope Nicholas V. I got quite interested in that some years ago, and what I found out was, in addition to that, the Dum Diversas, whatever it's called, is an indulgence. And one of the requirements of an indulgence is that you first have to have committed the sin. And I thought that was very interesting. But, and by the way, you pay your money to the Catholic Church in order to get that absolved.
Right, to get the indulgence. I mean, that was the gig that Martin Luther pretty much blew up. When he nailed his 91 Theses to the church wall in, what was it, Wittenberg, I think it was.
I can't remember. Yeah. But I do remember that, and I said, well, hell, that's what made slavery.
Well, no, slavery long predated that. Slavery predated the Catholic Church. It predated Jesus. I mean, the Greeks held slaves 3,000 years ago.
I mean, chattel slavery in specific. Another thing, I just want to get your opinion on this. But I heard Trump, away from the cameras, the main cameras, make the statement that he desired that the president should have some say in the decisions of the Fed.
Right. Yeah, he's
the next day, I heard that his sons had invested in cryptocurrency.
Yeah. Yep.
That would be a way of him becoming like Putin, like all transactions of that nature would go through him.
Fabulously rich. I get it. I mean, Trump wants to be able to manipulate the Fed so he can manipulate the economy for his own political gain, but I agree with you. I think that probably his sons getting into the crypto market has something to do with it, too. Jules, thanks for the call. Ken in Madison, Wisconsin. Hey, Ken, what's up?
Hey, Tom. Thanks for taking my call. I get the comparisons of Trump with Hitler, but how come I think he should also be compared to Aldrich Ames and Benedict Arnold?
I'm fine with that. I mean, Benedict Arnold at least was a decorated war veteran in the Revolutionary War, well thought of before he tried to sell out his country for a title and for some cash. I don't think Trump even has the nobility that Benedict Arnold had.
Sure.
I mean, he's just a sleazy real estate developer, and a rapist.
Yeah. Okay, Ken.
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
I'm with you.
Okay,
Thank you very much. Dave in Seattle. Hey, Dave, what's up?
Hi, Tom. I'd like to offer the Democrats a sure win scenario. They could platform, get rid of, go public financing of elections, get rid of this 3-year campaigning, stop all the phone calls, stop all the emails for.
Yeah, the Brits do this. You can only campaign for what, 6 or 8 weeks or something like that. I don't recall the number of weeks, but there's it's a very limited period of time during which you can campaign, and it works very well for them.
$2 billion.
A lot of countries do that.
Take the $2 billion and use it for the programs for kids and.
Yeah. I'm with you. Dave, brilliant. Thank you very much. Lori in Pittsburgh. Hey, Lori, what's on your mind today?
Hi, Tom. I've always been very interested in cults, especially I went to 12 years of Catholic school, is the Opus Dei cult, and they have infiltrated our government in such a deep way. I'm reading the book Opus by Gareth Gore. It just came out about a month ago, and he's a journalist that wrote it and takes it back to 1928 up till now. And there, so many people, including Vance, who became a Catholic later on in life, are part of this cult. And it's a secretive cult, but it is 3 of the justices. Scalia, of course, was one. Bill Barr, Steve Bannon.
Who are the 3 justices?
And Leonard Leo. Pardon me?
Who are the 3 justices who are Opus Dei?
Roberts. Excuse me, I'm blanking the other gentleman's name. Isn't that terrible?
Oh, there's Kavanaugh, Alito, Barrett.
Yeah, Alito. And I heard Kavanaugh also.
Yeah.
That's not in the book, but Leonard Leo, of course, is, and I would hope that you would maybe try to get this journalist to talk about it, because they have gotten themselves in the place they wanted to be, getting rich Catholics to get a lot of money for 2025.
Not hearing
it's very threatening. For 2025.
Okay, Lori, I'm sorry, we're out of time. I got to run. Thank you for the call. And thanks for being with us today. We'll be back tomorrow, same time, same place. In the meantime, don't forget, democracy is not a spectator sport. Get out there, get active, tag, you're it. I'll see you tomorrow.
You've been listening to Thom Hartmann. For audio and video archives, visit thomhartmann.com.
In addition to bringing you the Thom Hartmann program here on Free Speech TV and Video Media Online, we also have a whole set of ways you can interact with us and tools you can use to spread the word about the importance of democracy and the threats to it in our republic. First, there's your daily homework. Sue Nethercutt puts together a daily email newsletter that has a link to every story I discuss on the air, so you can find my sources and you can share them with your friends. It's free and you can sign up at thomhartmann.com. Second, I publish my daily take every day over at the hartmannreport.com website. That's also free if you want the daily 5 days a week rant in your inbox. No ads either. Third, we have the podcasts. There's the free 1-hour version of our daily show that's advertising supported. You can find that wherever you get your podcasts normally. And then there's also the podcast of the entire 3-hour show with no advertisements, and that's available by subscription over at thomhartmann.com. So check them all out at thomhartmann.com and hartmannreport.com.